Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. Today we are doing episode 325. I hope you're all doing great. There's a lot that's happening in the world. I'm sure there's a lot to discuss. I'm sure there's a lot of questions you all have. So before we get into the questions, let's see who all is there in the live chat with us tonight. Precious Talks, Anish24, Bhaskar Bandit, Hari Banana Higard. Okay. Um, Hari Banana Hegad is here from Jharkhand. Good to see you, sir. Good to see you. Geopolitical Dubai, good evening. As always, from Indore. Sachin GK, General Subutai. General Subutai is here. Advait Ashwini, Shreyas Digay. Gajapati Dev is here from Odisha. Good to see you, sir. Nabanita Das. Shreyas Digay once again from Pune. Abhirup Sarkar. Utkarsh Shukla. Nirvana Shanks. Konichiwa, sir. Konichiwa. Good to see you. Somi McLevin is also here with us. Abhishek Shukla live. Animals for Laugh is here from Mumbai. Soldier Boy is also here. Meow meow indeed. User U7V8V. Abhyuday Singh Jai Jambudweep. Abhishek Shukla live from Kanpur. Manhattan says there are earthquakes in Iran. I think we're going to have to look at it. Somi Jain is here from Jaipur. John M. Funk is here. Manhattan is also talking about earthquakes in Iran. Amisha Mishra, good evening, ma'am. User 7, yes. Animish Bharatiya, Ram Ramji, Ram Ram. McLevin, Jay Bajrang Bali. Somi, do I like Frank Sinatra's songs? Not bad. Yeah, some of them are great, I'm sure. Manhattan, Animals for Laugh, -6552, Chandru SH, SKR7733 is here from Peshawar, India. Peshawar, India, good evening. General Subutai once again. Ayush Singh, Pranam Sarji, Pranam Sarji. Shubham Jha, hello. Manisha Cardoso, Namaste Ji, Namaste ma'am. Snehashish Samal, hello. Who else do we have? Ganesh Deshpande, Rahul is here. Hello, Rahul Ji. What else do we have? Who else do we have? We have Utkarsh Shukla once again. Mac4J1U. Amit Pandey, good evening. Mohit Thakare, hello. Vijay Vaghela, good evening. Ganesh Deshpande, Ritik Pawar. Ashish Nahi Pata Bhai. Guru. Okay, namaste. Who else do we have? User U7V8V from Kerala. Good evening. Good evening. And everybody else, good evening. So let us get going with the questions. First of all, there's this talk about earthquakes in Iran. So Manhattan says there are many earthquakes in Iran. Do they have nukes? I haven't seen these reports, but let us now quickly get to the bottom of this if we can in a couple of minutes. Iran earthquake. Do we have any? Iran, sorry, Iran. Do we have multiple earthquakes? 99 earthquakes in Iran in just 1 week. Okay, that's what In Shorts is saying. And there are YouTube videos about 99 earthquakes in 1 week. Do we have USGS? What does USGS have to say about this? Let's see. This is 2026, 123. That's a couple of days ago. And yeah, not a lot here. Do we have a list of earthquakes in Iran? Wikipedia, as always, is not necessarily a good source of information, but let's see. It's going all the way to 2000 BC or something. Okay, nothing much here once again. What does this have to say? Earthquake.usgs.gov. Once again, the same thing. Okay, so I'm not sure where this story is coming from. In short, I'm not sure how reliable it is. Hindustan Times is a reasonably reliable, I suppose, piece of source of information, I suppose. Surge of seismic activity in Iran. Just a paragraph or something. Okay, that's not a lot. So I'm not sure how reliable these claims are. Not sure, but I'll keep an eye on this. Okay, so then let us go and take the first super chat. We have Bhaskar Bandit. Privyet indeed, sir. Yes, I'm good. I hope you're doing great too. So the Chinese Communist Party has just arrested Zhang Yuxia, CDS equivalent in Indian Army, Chief of Defense Services, Chief of Defense Staff, kind of, yeah, equivalent. So how does a power fight and find replacements if they keep sacking lieutenant generals and major generals? So it looks like this is part of the power struggle. Looks like, there's indications, there's speculation that maybe there was some kind of coup attempt in Beijing, right? That's the speculation that's making the rounds in social media, etc. right now. Not just in social media, but also among well-informed people, think tanks and analysts and so on. Looks like there could have been a coup attempt against Xi Jinping, probably done by, looks like, Zhang Yusha. And he has been arrested, removed, and strong condemnation has been put out in Chinese official communications of Zhang Yusha. And yeah, looks like a purge has happened. And in the past several months, plenty of Chinese high-ranking generals, etc., have been, removed from service, arrested. So looks like Xi Jinping is ensuring that no one in the PLA, so-called PLA, People's Liberation Army, is allowed to stay in power. Anyone who could potentially be opposed to him. And this looks like the latest in that. So a lot of people have been purged. A lot of high-ranking generals and commanders have been purged out of the People's Liberation Army under the orders of Xi Jinping, right? So what happens when you remove such high-ranking officers? What happens? I mean, how do you replace them, right? I mean, Zhang Yusha is one of the final last people left in the PLA who had actual combat experience. The 1979 Vietnam War. Let's quickly Google this guy, Zhang Yusha. Okay, Zhang Yusha. So what does Wikipedia have to say about him? He was 75 years old, and he so he took part in the Sino-Vietnamese War of 1979, right? And also Battle of Lao Shan, between all that. So he was one of the last remaining top commanders in the PLA who had actually seen military combat. China hasn't fought a war since the 1979 war against Vietnam, which China lost, which China initiated, and China was beaten back, right? China got a bloody nose in that. So China lost that. And after that, China hasn't fought any actual conflict, any actual war. And this guy was one of the last, high top-ranking people who had served in it. So now you have the entire PLA top cadre, top brass. If you see them, they haven't really seen combat. They haven't really seen warfare. So they're essentially, they may be experienced in terms of seniority and so on, promotions and all, but they haven't seen warfare. They haven't seen combat. So that's what we have. So what happens when you sack people like these? How do you replace them? Well, you replace them with a bunch of people. There's always a large pool of officers who come below them, right, in the rank hierarchy. So you can always promote somebody who is loyal to Xi Jinping and who has reasonably good track record in the PLA. I mean, obviously, track record. When we talk about track record here, we're not talking about combat track record, because there's no combat track record since 1979. But people who have done the right things and dedicated, disciplined, obedient, loyal to the Chinese Communist Party, loyal to Xi Jinping thought, all that. So you raise people like those, and what it gives you is a PLA top brass that is, well, inexperienced in combat. But that's what you have. So looks like there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes in Beijing, in China. It looks like Xi Jinping is consolidating his position and fighting off any potential challengers. And looks like there could have been some kind of attempted coup, which is why this guy was rapidly, suddenly removed, and a very rapid condemnation was put out in Chinese official government communique. Right? So that's what's going on in China. Maybe it's good news for Taiwan, Bhaskar Bandit says, is Singapore a Chinese vassal or a US vassal? Allegedly, does it also act as a money laundering place like London or Dubai? Well, we know that London definitely is the global epicenter of money laundering. It's also the place where, former dictators, etc., go to retire and so on. People who have served the West, that sort of people, right? Uh, so that's the kind of place it is, London. What about Singapore? I don't know about Dubai money laundering and all that. I'm not aware of that. But what about Singapore? So Singapore is kind of the London of the East, essentially, especially as a major financial hub in the Eastern hemisphere. Well, London is also technically the Eastern hemisphere, I suppose. But in Asia, in the Asia Pacific region, you have Singapore. That's a major financial center. Once again, I'm not sure about whether there's any money laundering or whatever happening out of Singapore. But Singapore obviously is very much allied or aligned with the West. So I'm sure that sometimes you may have Chinese warships that may dock at Singapore port. But Singapore is very much aligned with the West, not with China. It has good relations with China. And the Chinese Communist Party has actually studied Singapore in great detail in order to understand how to transform a nation and how to bring about the reforms that make a nation a great power. So Singapore can't be a great power, it's just a city-state. But Deng Xiaoping used to send CCP, Chinese Communist Party officials, to Singapore to study how they have, structured their government and how they carried out reforms that transformed Singapore in just one generation from third world to first world. And they implemented that, the Chinese. They've been, they deeply admire Singapore. And obviously Singapore is dominated by Chinese origin people. So you have these factors that definitely show us commonalities between Singapore and China. But Singapore is very much aligned with the West. You have American aircraft carriers that routinely dock in Singapore. Reasonably routinely dock in Singapore. So Singapore, if you want to designate Singapore as a vassal, it definitely is not a Chinese vassal. Of course, Singapore has, you could say Singapore is kind of a US vassal. Singapore has, of course, stood up for itself when it comes to not bending to American diktats and whims. For example, there was the famous caning case, right? Singapore caning of Michael Fay. So there was this guy in 1994, American teenager who was sentenced to be lashed 6 times with a cane for violating some rules, right? Vandalism Act. And the American government protested. They said that you can't do this. And Singapore said, go to hell. We're going to cane him. And they caned him. So, Singapore has kind of stood up for itself in these small matters. Let's see this also. Do Chinese warships dock in Singapore? I'm pretty sure they do. Yes, Chinese warships do dock in Singapore, right? Do regularly dock in Singapore. So Singapore it's not a Chinese vassal. It has good relations with China. But if you want to assign vassalhood, it's definitely more of a US vassal. Okay. Bhaskar Bandit says, why do ordinary Europeans seem so naive about the US being the dominant power in the EU? Many on social media act as if Poland and Denmark are bravely standing up to US bullying, and they denied Trump Greenland and whatnot. Look, most people believe whatever they are taught. I don't expect European textbooks to teach kids that, we are not sovereign nations. Our sovereignty has been taken away by the US. Our big boss, our overlord is the US. That's what I don't expect any European nation to teach this to their kids in schools. They're gonna tell kids that, our country is great. We have the rule of law. We have laws. We are part of the EU, blah, 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 blah. They will not mention any of this. Look at what you have in Japan. Most Japanese people are super pacifist because they have been taught in school that Japan is a terribly violent, evil nation that deserves to be punished for its sins. And the Americans are this great benevolent power that has placed Japan under its protection. And Japan has forever forsworn the use of military force and all of that, right? And because of what they are taught, the Japanese kids are completely oblivious to the fact that Japan hosts more than 130 permanent US military bases on its soil. It's under permanent US military occupation. Despite this being there right in front of their eyes, they don't realize that they are not a sovereign country. They're an occupied country. Eventually, once you reach a certain age, you may start questioning that, but most people don't question anything. Most people just want to be told what to think, and they are happy with that. Thinking is hard work. Thinking hurts the brain. Why think? Just live in this happy illusory world. So that's the thing. I'm sure there are Europeans who understand what's happening, but the ordinary European person will be oblivious to what's going on, and that's how the world works. That's the facade of democracy and all that. Bhaskar Bandit says, please elaborate on how the Pan-Turan corridor can allegedly benefit our ally nation Israel. As we discussed, this one area where Bharat, Iran together are with Armenia against Turkey, Azerbaijan, and the prior. Okay, let's go to the map. Okay, since we are discussing the Pan-Turan corridor. Yeah, okay. So let's open the map, and we're going to discuss the Pan-Turan corridor, and first of all, understand what part of the world we're talking about here. So we are talking about, since we're talking about Turkey, see, if you look at Central Asia, yes, you have nations like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan. Also, well, Chinese occupied East Turkestan, etc. All these nations are Turkic nations. Okay, their people speak Turkic languages, and they have a Turkic ethnicity. Turkic ethnicity mixed with some Indo-Scythian ethnicity, which is older, but that's what it is. So these are all Turkic nations. And to the west, we have Azerbaijan, which is not part of Central Asia. It's part of the Caucasus. It's also a Turkic nation. And then further to the west, bypassing Armenia, leapfrogging Armenia, we have Turkey. So if we go east of Turkey, if you just disregard Armenia, you have Azerbaijan, then the Caspian Sea, then a bunch of Turkic nations. Now, in olden days, the Turkic nations, this territory was called Turan. So the great dream of Turkey is to essentially erase Armenia from the map of the world, have Azerbaijan take over Armenia, or maybe have Armenia's territory split into Turkey and Azerbaijan, okay? And then create this corridor that stretches all the way from essentially Anatolia, Turkey, through Azerbaijan, over the Caspian Sea into this Turkic region, large Turkic region, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, sorry, not Tajikistan. Tajikistan is Iranian, Indo-Iranian. Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all these Turkic nations. So that is the idea of this Pan-Turan corridor, this great Turkic corridor, this broad region in Central Asia that essentially is entirely Turkic in ethnicity and culture and language. The only issue is Armenia. So that's why the Turks want to solve Armenia by essentially wiping Armenia out and finish what they started in 1915. So that's the Pan-Turan corridor, okay? So if the Pan-Turan corridor happens, then Turkey has unfettered access all the way into Central Asia, all the way to Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, it borders essentially almost Mongolia. That's how far east it reaches. And this region, obviously, it has plenty of natural resources, oil, gas, Kazakhstan, etc. Lots of mineral resources, and so on. And so it's a pretty lucrative region from the natural resources viewpoint. And for Turkey, it's obviously Turkey likes to position itself as the leader of the Turkic world. So if it can connect with the Turkic world, it will give Turkey more power, prestige, resources, all of that. And Turkey obviously has dreams of reviving the Ottoman Caliphate kind of thing. So neo-Ottoman ambitions. So that's why the Pan-Turan corridor is the dream of Turkey. Now, how does it benefit other nations? So how does it benefit the US, for example? So as we discussed, this region, the Central Asia region, is rich in natural resources, and Turkey is a member of NATO. It's a US ally, US vassal, even though it has imperial ambitions of its own. So if Turkey can control these nations and have access to this entire region, that it benefits the US straight away, right? Because US can also tap into this region. Also, it kind of if this region comes under Turkic and American domination, then it's a challenge for China as well as Russia, because Russia likes to think of Central Asia as its region of region of interest, region of dominance. But if Turkey becomes dominant in the region, it's a challenge to Russia as well as China. China has this Belt and Road initiative that it seeks to expand through Central Asia. It's not working anymore. The project is kind of dead, but it's a further challenge to China, right? Because China also seeks the resources in Central Asia. Now, what about Israel? So Israel, as we have discussed in the past, Israel is an ally of Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan and Turkey are mortal enemies of Armenia. And India and Iran are supporting Armenia. So India is essentially supporting a nation that Israel is opposing. So Israel and India are on opposing sides when it comes to this conflict, Azerbaijan, Armenia. So Iran and India are supporting Armenia. Now, if this Pan-Turan corridor happens, how does it help Israel? So first of all, why is Israel supporting Azerbaijan? Well, two reasons. First of all, Israel is purchasing Azerbaijani energy, oil and gas, right, in reasonable quantities, large quantities, I suppose. That's one reason. The second reason is that, if you look at Iran's northwestern region is the Azerbaijan province, and the people here are ethnic Azerbaijanis. So if Iran can, if Iran is an ally of Azerbaijan, then it can use the Azerbaijani population in Iran to keep an eye on what's happening in Iran and possibly do, in the future, some kind of regime change operation, if that is even possible. So that's why Israel is aligned or allied with Azerbaijan. And if the Pan-Turan corridor becomes a thing, then Israel can, Azerbaijan becomes more relevant, more powerful, and Israel can tap and this is a challenge then for Iran also, because Iran and Turkey are, you could say, adversaries. So if Turkey becomes dominant in Central Asia, that's a major challenge for Iran also, and that's obviously is an indirect good thing for Israel. So multiple reasons why Israel can benefit from a Pan-Turan corridor happening. I'm sure the Israelis have no ill will towards the Armenian people, but well, it is what it is. National interest comes first. Bhaskar Bandit says, we discuss often how ISRO is underfunded, but what benefits can Bharat have by developing an equivalent to the James Webb or the Hubble Space Telescope? Any benefits that will add not only to astronomy but military? See, why does the US spend so much on NASA? Why does it spend so much on these projects like Hubble, like the James Webb Space Telescope? Why does it spend so much money on these spacecraft like New Horizons that did a flyby of Pluto 11 years ago, and it's still going out into outer space? Now, what about the Pioneer missions, Pioneer 1, Pioneer 2, the Voyager missions? The Voyager spacecraft are now out into outer space beyond, essentially out of the solar system. Why does the US spend so much money on these things? What's there? What's the point? What's the point? Why does the US spend so much money on things like LIGO, right? The gravitational wave detector costs so much money. What do you get out of this? You get scientific expertise, engineering expertise, technological expertise. All of these things have spin-offs in so many different areas. So many different areas. For example, space. If you want to put something like the JWST, James Webb Space Telescope, into one of the Lagrange points, the one that's behind the Earth, in the Earth's shadow, well, you need to have a high quality space program to do that. Of course, they use the French rocket for that, Ariane, but whatever. So first of all, to do all these projects, you need to have a high quality space program, which means you need a high quality engineering pool of talent, which means you need to develop a high quality education system for that, and R&D and all that, right? So just to put this thing into orbit, you need high quality engineers, and those engineers, they obviously work on space rockets and all. They can also work on missiles, and those engineering skills can be applied to any engineering work, right? Then you have if you have JWST, James Webb Space Telescope, all the way, millions of kilometers away, and you need to get signals from that. You need to have extremely high quality telemetry, okay, telecommunications equipment. So you need to develop that. That has other spin-offs into all kinds of military applications and other applications, right? So the space program itself has had so many spin-offs that have military applications that essentially you can't imagine. So all these things, just by developing things like this, you're forced to develop technologies that have applications in lots of other domains, including the military domain. So let's say India, okay, Bharat develops, let's say, uh, uh, something like the James Webb Space Telescope. So that's a massive, massive machine. To launch that just into orbit, you need probably a rocket that's more powerful than the most powerful rocket India has. I'm sure the PSLV or the GSLV or whatever, LMV3, whatever, I'm sure it can't take. What's the JWST's launch mass? Let me see. Okay, let's see quickly. JWST launch mass. What was the launch mass? 6,000 something kilograms, 6.1 tons. Okay. LVM payload capacity 4,000. The GS low Earth orbit. But we want this to go beyond low Earth orbit. We want this to not even go into geosynchronous transfer orbit. We need the telescope to essentially go into the Lagrange point. So you need to send it beyond the GTO. So the Indian rocket simply can't do the job. We don't have a powerful enough rocket. So we'll have to develop a more powerful rocket. Well, there you have augmented capabilities just to launch this thing. Then we will need telemetry. We'll need to have telecommunication. There are capabilities that can actually communicate with this thing in near real time, as close to real time as possible. So you need and to develop a telescope of that quality, with those hexagonal, elements in its mirror and all of that. You need to develop high quality optics and whatnot, which obviously, if you can develop high quality optics, you can have military applications of that. So all of these things, they may look like wasteful expenditure, but the technological capabilities you develop by building these things, they have applications everywhere. We only see just one linear thing that we are building a telescope. But the US military at some point in time donated two space telescopes to NASA. Okay, because they were redundant and the US military did not need those. Those were spy telescopes, and each of those telescopes was more powerful in terms of capabilities than the Hubble Space Telescope. So something like Hubble that is turned towards the stars, if you turn it towards the Earth, imagine what it can do, right? Or something similar to Hubble. So that's the point. These things everything is interconnected. Just by developing missions like these, you'll develop a pool of talent and a set of capabilities that have applications in all kinds of different fields, especially the military field. Rocketry and missiles are the same thing. Telescopes and spy satellite capabilities are the same thing, essentially, right? Telecommunications, telemetry, all of that. You need that in the military domain. And all the electronics and whatnot you develop will also be used in the military domain. So all of this comes together, right? But we in India don't have this understanding, possibly, or maybe we don't have the ambition. That's why ISRO is just underfunded, and I don't know what's happening. Ritik Pawar says, are we back in the era where the strong will eat up the weak? When did we ever leave that era? In the past, things were done nicely. Today, things are done brashly. Donald Trump is throwing around his weight like a wildfire in a library, right? Like an elephant in a garden. But the US has always done this. In the past, they've done it diplomatically. They have not they've not flaunted their power, but they've always done the same things. I mean, in the 1990s, what did they do to Yugoslavia? What was it? It was brutal. Was it not the time when the strong ate up the weak? Yugoslavia was weak. Its strong protector, the USSR, had disintegrated. So what did the remaining strong guy, the US, do? Ate up Yugoslavia, right? You didn't see that? The US did all these regime change operations from the 2000s, 1990s, 2000s, all the way until now. They recently, I mean, it's always been this way. But in the past, you could not see it. I could see it. I was telling this for 4 years, but now you're beginning to see it because now Trump is making it very obvious. It's always been an era where the strong eat up the weak. The 1990s, it was that. 1980s, 1970s, 60s, it's always been that way. The strong always eat up the weak. But typically they do it quietly, behind the scenes. They do it with diplomatic finesse. Diplomacy is typically nice and genteel and polite and sophisticated and cultured. Today, diplomacy is brash, especially American diplomacy and Chinese diplomacy. The Chinese have toned it down. The Americans are very brash now, in the Trump era. But the world has always been the same. The world is unchanging. The rules of power have never changed. They're still the same. VK Bajoria. Well, thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Abhishek Srivastav says, history of Germany, their culture, language, origin. Arey bhai, whole history you want. You want their whole history. Look, I can't give you the whole history of Germany. You can do like 100 1-hour episodes for that. But history of Germany in compressed time scale. There were a bunch of Germanic tribes, that the Romans were aware of. So north of the river Rhine, Rhine. Would you like to see the map of the Rhine? North of the Rhine, the Romans called that region Germania Magna. Okay, Greater Germany or whatever. See, the Rhine River is the border between Switzerland and Germany. If you come here from the Bodensee, you will see this river, the Rhine. This river here. See? Rhine River. So this river is the border between Switzerland and Germany, and the Romans considered the lands north of the Rhine to essentially be Germany, Germania Magna. South of that you had the Celtic lands. West of that you had Gaulish, which is Gaulish territory, which is now France. Okay, and north of the Rhine you had Germania Magna, and there were a bunch of Germanic tribes that the Romans were aware of, and they fought them and they subjugated them to some extent. But those lands were terribly inhospitable, full of forests and bogged down and all that. And so the Romans kind of stayed out of it. They kind of tried to subjugate the people, but did not quite work. You had 10 AD or 9 AD, the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, which was a disaster for Rome and so on. So you had Germanic tribes there, mainly, pretty wild people. And then the Romans fought them on multiple occasions and so on. And then there's a bit long history where Germany did not really matter. And then you had the Holy Roman Empire, and it was partially in Germany and so on. And then you have Gutenberg and all that, and you have Martin Luther in the dark ages of Europe, and that gives rise to the Enlightenment. Gutenberg and Martin Luther. And then in 1871 before 1871 we have hundreds of Germanic principalities, duchies, and all this little what in India we would call princely states. Yeah. And then in 1871, for the first time in history, this entire territory was united for the first time ever by the great Iron Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. He was Prussian, and Germany became kind of an embodiment of Prussia. And that's 1871, the first ever unification of Germany, an artificial nation created out of a bunch of principalities, and unified under one language. There's a bunch of languages in Germany, Germanic languages, but it was the one language we call German was superimposed on everything. And then you have Germany, taking off because they had a world-class, probably best in its kind education system, which focused on science and technology. And that's why Germany gave us quantum mechanics and so much more. And obviously Germany became a major industrial power. And then you have World War I, World War II, and that's the end of Germany essentially, because Germany becomes occupied by the Americans in 1945, and it has been ever since. And there we have it. Saswat AIIMS says, was Israel involved in 26/11 terror attacks? Many claim RSS were traitors. I have no idea about these things. I have never heard of any Israeli involvement. I don't know any of the speculations, so I can't say. Sorry. Shubham Vavare says, succession plan after Xi. Power scramble in CCP. We just discussed this. We have no idea what's the succession plan after Xi. Mr. Xi Jinping has no intention, as far as I know, of giving up power. He wants a fourth term as the president. They're obviously, the Chinese Communist Party is this cutthroat system. Okay? Only the most ruthless rise to the top and survive. You have to be ruthless in the Chinese Communist Party system. And that's why they always have high quality leadership. Not soft, useless, weak leaders. They have ruthless leaders. Because the system is so ruthless. It's so cutthroat. It's dog eat dog. And Xi Jinping, if you look at his rise, political rise, he has left a trail of opponents in his wake. So that's how it is. So there's going to be, Xi Jinping, if you are the Chinese president, you always have to be on your toes. You always have to keep looking, behind the shoulder. What's everyone doing? And that's the situation. So obviously, it looks like there's been some kind of incident in the CCP, maybe some kind of coup attempt or something, and it's been foiled as far as we know. And that's why the general was unceremoniously ousted, and harsh condemnation was issued in the Chinese media. But what's the succession plan after Xi Jinping? Well, how am I to know? China is an opaque country. The Chinese Communist Party system is super opaque. Whatever plans exist, we are not supposed to know. So we can only speculate. I have no idea what's the succession plan after Xi. McLevin says, General Class is angry at BJP. We do really need an alternative. Yeah, the UGC thing, right? Those horrific draconian, the whatever it was, See, what I'll say is this. Our leaders keep saying that caste is a big problem in India, right? Caste is a big problem in India. Big problem in India. So if caste is a big problem in India, why don't you remove caste from everything? Remove caste from birth certificates, remove caste from school certificates, remove caste from every official document. Remove it, right? Make it irrelevant. They won't do it. You go to a government office, they will ask for your caste. You go to a temple, nobody asks for your caste. But they say that temples are casteist and government is secular. So that's the situation. Now, if you have this problem, caste problem, and you claim it's an inherent problem in a society, remove it. But they're not removing it. And instead of removing it, they're creating this permanent distinctions between artificial divisions, oppressor and oppressed. So only certain categories of people are the oppressed, and they are permanently oppressed. And certain categories of people are permanent oppressors. You're creating a permanent solution to a temporary, artificial, imaginary problem. Maybe not imaginary. Maybe it exists. Okay, let's say it exists. So you're implementing a permanent solution to a temporary problem. A permanent solution to a temporary problem becomes a permanent problem. That's what's happening. And it's unfortunate. Net Stat Grep says, are holograms scientifically possible? A device projecting 3D images in the air and vacuum, not the spinning screen ones that mimic a hologram. Are holograms scientifically possible? A device projecting 3D images in the air and vacuum. Okay, 3D images in the air and vacuum, not the spinning. Yeah, we have the screen things in which we look, and it looks like a hologram, right? It mimics a hologram. You can see it from different angles, and yeah, it looks like it's a 3-dimensional thing, but it's actually a 2-dimensional image, and it uses a tricks of optics to do that. Now, can you have a device that actually projects a 3-dimensional image into air? Well, you see, if you want to project, you certainly can project photons, light, into the air. But how do you have the photons create visually, a static image somewhere? You can create an image by projecting light on a screen, but air is not a screen. The vacuum is not a screen. So how do you have light stop at a place and essentially being emitted from a fixed position, from a fixed location in 3-dimensional space, which is air or vacuum? Scientifically possible. I haven't thought about this. I'm sure this is actually a technological problem, and you certainly can make air emit light by having excitation of the air molecules or gas molecules. Can you have vacuum emit light? Vacuum contains light. Vacuum can't emit light. You have pair production, etc. This quantum field theoretical phenomena, but you can't have that actually create light. So it may be possible in air. It's just an engineering issue. There's nothing against the laws of physics that happens in that. A vacuum, it may be more difficult, but I am sure that also is a problem that can be solved through engineering. So I would say there's nothing in the laws of physics that prevents such phenomena. prevents you from having such an effect. But how to solve it, how to solve the problem, how to make it happen, that is something that needs to be thought about. So I think scientifically it should be possible. There's nothing in the laws of physics that prevents this from being possible. But engineering, obviously, it is a difficult problem to solve, but not unsolvable. Bhaskar Mandit says, during and post Operation Sindoor, we saw these earthquakes in temporary nation Pakistan as well, just as now in Iran. What can such a thing signify allegedly? Well, see, I took a look at the time, I mean, a few months ago, I took a look at those earthquakes that had happened in May, right, in Pakistan. Let's see if we can pull up that data. Earthquakes in Pakistan, May 2025. Earthquakes in, what is this? In Pakistan, May 2025. Do we have data? Let's see. Do we have data? USGS or whatever. Earthquake today, Substack, earthquake insights. Do we have USGS? Do we have that? No. Okay, let's see. This is February 25. I said May, right? Let's see. I'm sorry, I don't mean to yell at Google. So this is when? When did this happen? Okay, this is January. The point is, what I'm trying to say, okay, list of earthquakes in 2025. Do we have any? Okay, let's not say geological data. Okay, data. Volcano discovery. Once again, we don't have official. I'm not sure which is the. Okay, do we have earthquake list? Okay, complete Pakistan earthquake report. Okay. Location. This is January 20. This is today. Hell no. Map of latest earthquakes in near Pakistan. So can I, magnitude 2+, major only, all earthquakes, latest earthquake. Can I filter by date? I suppose I can't. 240 yearly. So once again, I'm not sure. Can I go back? Let's see. Do we have any other data? What's volcano discovery? So do we? Okay, May 31, May 24. Okay, let's say May 13, for example. This is Afghanistan. This is Job Balochistan. Let's see, info. What info do we have? How deep was the earthquake? Depth 10 kilometers. So look at this. This is the point I'm making. This earthquake happened at a depth of 10 kilometers. Now, humans typically can't dig to a depth of 10 kilometers. Let's say we are aware of the fact that if you detonate a nuclear weapon underground, it shows up in seismograph records as a low intensity earthquake. And you can pinpoint, essentially, if you have multiple seismographs, where it happened and how deep it happened. So typically when you do an underground nuclear test, you may do it a few 100 meters underground, maybe a kilometer underground. Let's ask Google, at what depth are underground nuclear tests conducted? What depth? Okay, so depths of 200 to 800 meters, maybe a kilometer, right? Like I was saying. But these earthquakes that we're talking about, that typically happen at a depth of like multiple kilometers, 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers, maybe more. That can't be human in origin. That can't be nuclear detonations, unless these reports are lying to us. And that's also a possibility. Maybe the earthquake happened maybe the event happened at a depth of 800 meters, but they are saying 10 kilometers. They're lying. That's also possible. But based on the open source information that we have, those bunch of earthquakes around May, that typically happened at significant depths. Typically depths that humans don't reach. The deepest hole ever dug was about 9-10 kilometers, right? So unless the data is manufactured, unless the data is falsified, those were not nuclear tests. Now, what I'm seeing in Iran, I'm not sure. I mean, took a look a while ago at the latest earthquake data in Iran. I was not able to find much, so I think we'll just wait and watch and see how it's going. Right. Amisha says, you should write a book on the Aryan picnic myth. I should, shouldn't I? Yeah. I've got multiple books in here. Now I'm in the process of slowly, laboriously, tediously bringing them out. So yes, I will certainly write a book on this Aryan picnic myth eventually. I have a couple of books that need to come out first. So I'm working on those first. But yes, thank you for the reminder. I have multiple people reminding me of this. Some people remind me of this every day. So Amisha ji, thank you to you too for reminding me. I certainly will. Top 7 YT says, blunders of Barkha that were with Kargil 2611. See, look, my regular viewers know I don't speak about internal politics in India. Okay, I stay out of these matters. We all know what happened. But I will stay out of this matter. I speak about 3 things: history, geopolitics, and science. I don't discuss Indian politics. And this comes in Indian politics, actually, even though it's actually journalism, but it's political in nature. So I will not discuss these things, right? But I think we all know. So, Rohan says, RSS had talked about creating a new caste system in Kolkata. PC, if you had to make a system where there can never be discrimination, how will it be? Look, I will not discuss Indian politics. All these matters are internal matters of India, like I said. But if I had to make a system where there can never be discrimination, I will not be able to make such a system. There can never be a system where there is no discrimination. Never. Impossible. Do you imagine that outside India all the systems are without discrimination? Do you think in the US there's no discrimination? You think in Finland there's no discrimination? You think in other Western countries there's no discrimination? There can never be a society where zero discrimination exists. You are all taught by the Indian education system that the Indian system is horrible, the Indian culture is horrible, Hinduism is horrible, Indian civilization, etc. is horrible, and everything else is ideal. You know, that's how they make you hate yourselves and your ancestors. That's how they put this inferiority complex in your heads. I'm not saying the current Indian system is great. I think it's terrible. It's terrible. Okay? But if you want to create a system where, a society where there's no discrimination, you will never be able to create the society. No matter what rules you implement, no matter how many safeguards you put in, you will either have a draconian dictatorship, which itself will be discriminatory, or it simply won't work. Right? So, I mean, the Taliban, have you seen what they've done recently? Have you seen what the Taliban has done recently? I mean, I'm not sure if this report is true or not, but let me pull it up. Let me pull up this report. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but it's rather funny to see. Okay? So give me a second. Let me go to our friend Twitter. Okay, now. Ben, look at this. So this is a report from this Twitter account. I'm not sure how true it is. Okay, it says the Taliban has introduced a new law which divides Afghan society into 4 classes. How many? 4 classes, with different punishments prescribed for the same crime depending on social class status, or whatever you want to call it, division. Religious scholars are placed in the highest religious scholars are placed in the highest category and are exempt from severe punishment, with admonition deemed sufficient in case of wrongdoing. So the highest category in Afghan society is now religious scholars. What do you call religious scholars in the Indian subcontinent, I wonder? Okay, next. The second category includes respected elites such as tribal elders, military commanders, and influential figures. Second category is mainly warriors. Very interesting. Yeah, individuals from this group may be summoned and warned, but will not face imprisonment or corporal punishment. The third category consists of middle class, for whom imprisonment may be imposed, and the fourth and lowest category includes ordinary citizens who may face imprisonment, flogging, and all that. what is the Taliban doing? Right? The Taliban is an ideal society, right? In the Islamic world. Why are they creating these 4 levels of society? What would you call those 4 levels? I wonder. Anyhow, my point my point is, you can never have a society where there is zero discrimination. Impossible. User U7VB V8V says globalization cracks backlash equals elites nervous at WEF. Okay. Not sure if it's a question or a statement. WEF happened, and yeah, there's unease in the West for sure. Amisha G says, I was reading an article that says Russia is the world's worst patron, from Syria to Venezuela. Now Iran, Putin has overpromised and underdelivered. Do you agree? Russia isn't powerful enough to project power the way the US does. What can Russia do if the Americans decide to overthrow the government of Venezuela? What can Russia do? Does Russia have military bases in the region? Can Russia project power in the region? Russia can't do a thing. So if you are to make Russia your patron, then you should be aware of the limitations of Russia. In the case of Syria, Russia did what it could. But at the end, what happened? The Americans launched this so-called civil war in Syria, right? Regime change operation in Syria in what, 2008, 9, 10, around that time. And the objective was to remove Bashar al-Assad from power. And what weapons or tools did the US use to oust Bashar al-Assad? They used Al-Qaeda and ISIS. These are American tools, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, terrorist groups. And what saved Syria? Russian intervention, Russian military intervention, Latakia Air Base, and so on, right? Tartus. The Russians sent military reinforcements, the Russians sent soldiers. They were able to project power in Syria, and they were able to stabilize Syria and prevent a regime change done by the US. And ISIS was beaten back by Syria, right? And the Russians trained Syrian troops and, stabilized the Syrian government. But then when this Jolani comes in and does his move on Damascus, what happened? The Syrian armed forces did not resist. Clearly, the Americans bought some of them. It's all about cash. So is it Russia that failed? No, it's, I would say, Assad who failed to ensure that there are no corrupt people in the Syrian armed forces. Has Russia failed in Syria? I would disagree. Russia did what it could. So Russia has limitations. The US has more than 800 extraterritorial military bases across the world. The Americans can project power anywhere. We are seeing it in real time now, right? Russia doesn't have it. So if you make Russia your patron, you should be aware of Russia's limitations. I would not say Russia is the worst patron. Russia tries what it can, but it has limitations. So it's your choice whether to make Russia your patron, to make the US your patron, or to stay entirely, or to remain entirely sovereign, which is the hardest thing in the world. So it's not like I don't agree with this. I don't agree. It's not like Russia has deliberately sabotaged these nations. Russia tried what it could, but it was understood that there are limitations. In the case of Venezuela itself, when the regime change happened, did the Venezuelan armed forces fight back, even attempt to fight? One guy launched a man-pad missile and he was blown to bits. That's it. Nobody else fired a single shot. Is that Putin's fault? No. It's cash, greenbacks that bought people. Right. Kiki Sushant says, I've been reading the Arthashastra. It mentions large chambers and buildings could be destroyed when required to protect city secrets of architecture. Can this be the reason we are not able to discover much? I'm not sure I have read that in the Arthashastra. Secrets of architecture. Look, the reason we have not been able to discover much, for example, in northern India, what kind of temple architecture did we have in northern India? Why are we unaware of this? Because the temples were all brought down, destroyed by Turkic invaders and occupiers. Only small temples remain, and whatever temples exist are all damaged and defaced and in ruins. The destruction was done by the foreign occupiers and invaders, not by our people. Right? When it comes to ancient forts, like the old fort in Delhi, etc., it still kind of stands to some extent. It's in terrible condition, in ruins. The ASI doesn't give a damn. It's still kind of trying to stand. When it comes to the fort of Kanishka in Patiala, Chandigarh, where is it? Kanishka's fort in Punjab. Whoopsie daisy, what is this? What happened here? Once again. Kanishka fort. Not Superman, fort. Kila Mubarak. Kila. Is this one? Kila Mubarak? Batinda. Okay. So you have this roughly 2,000-year-old fort that still stands in Batinda, Punjab. This fort was built by Sri Kanishka the Great. Still stands. So my point is, I can give you lots of examples like this. I am not sure exactly what you've read. I don't recall reading that, the Shastra. See, obviously, if you have some buildings that contain secrets and which should not fall into the hands of invaders or enemies, makes sense to destroy them. But it's not like we randomly destroyed temples and buildings and all that. No, it was the invaders that did that. And the reason why we are not able to discover much is because the ASI does nothing. The Archaeological Survey of India is okay. Vipul Pawar says, do cosmic voids encode inflationary information? Cosmic voids, do they encode inflationary information? Inflationary information. So we had a period of inflation in the very, very, very initial moments of the universe, after the birth of the universe and the event that we call the Big Bang. So there was this period of superluminal expansion of space-time. Okay, space-time expanded at mind-boggling speeds that vastly exceeded the speed of light. And that's the period of time, the epoch that we call the inflationary epoch. That began what? 10 raised to minus 20 seconds into the birth of the universe, something? Yeah, so around that sort of thing. Very early universe. And before the inflationary epoch, we have something called the very early universe, that period, about which we know next to nothing. So now we have inflation that happened, and inflation stretched everything out. And that after inflation, the universe was probably the size of a football or something in today's terms. And then it expanded further. It's been expanding ever since. So what happened during inflation? Do some of those clues exist in cosmic void? So first of all, what's a cosmic void? A cosmic void is these areas of space that are essentially empty. There is something called the Booth's void. Okay, let's see the Booth's void. What is that? Okay, Booth's void. Enormous, nearly spherical region of space, roughly 700 million light years from here, and it's kind of empty, as lonely as it can be. It's a YouTube video. It's a Booth's void. Doesn't mean there's nothing there. We're not entirely sure. So that's the Booth's void and other cosmic voids. Do we have any other example? Cosmic voids. So yeah, there's vast spaces between cosmic filaments. Okay. Now, what are these cosmic filaments? The very largest scale in the universe. So look, coming back to the scale, we have the solar system, right? Earth and moon and planets around the sun. Then we have the region, the stellar neighborhood, which is Proxima Centauri, AB, and so on and so forth, Alpha Centauri, all the surrounding stars. Then we have the Milky Way galaxy. Then we have the neighboring galaxy Andromeda. And then we have the local cluster of galaxies. Then we have the Laniakea supercluster. That's a big supercluster of galaxies. And then all the superclusters are connected together by these filaments of dark matter. And these are filaments that we're talking about. And sometimes between filaments, we have these cosmic voids, but nothing. Essentially, the space seems to be empty. Now, do these empty voids encode inflationary information? That's the question that's being asked. I'm not sure. What kind of inflationary information do we have? Could we have? the inflaton field. Well, we can't really detect the inflaton field. So I'm not sure if cosmic voids encode inflationary information. They are obviously mysterious. And they're very far away. So we can't really say, but I'm not sure if they encode inflationary information. I'm not aware of it. Probably, I don't know. Would not venture a guess, but I would say I don't know. That's the answer, actually. Okay. Anyway, I hope I threw some light on what cosmic voids, etc., are and inflation is. Giora TV says, is it possible that instead of simply retiring and discarding old jets like the MiG-21, we could upgrade them into autonomous unmanned systems and use them for ISR or electronic warfare? What is ISR? Reconnaissance? ISR intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Okay, ISR. Right. It's certainly possible to do that. The only question is, if you're flying remotely flying a MiG-21, or if you have an AI on board that flies it autonomously, the only issue with the MiG-21 is how reliable is it? Are the airframes and the engines and so on? Because the MiG-21s have had so many crashes and failures, and if you're flying an autonomous MiG-21, what if it fails and then crashes and causes fatalities? That's the only thing. It certainly is possible. It's feasible. You would need a high quality AI system that's taught the rules, right? What to do and so on. The other thing is that if you want to use it for ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, the MiG-21 is a massive thing, right? It's a massive thing. It's a big unit. For ISR, you would ideally want to use smaller assets. A drone that is this size, almost undetectable, fly it high and have it loiter for 10 hours and do ISR quietly. A MiG-21 is big, visible, shows up on radar, massive, loud, etc. Makes way more sense to use drones. But you could use the MiG-21s as decoys, autonomous decoys, or wingmen. You could either fly them remotely or autonomously. Have an AI fly them autonomously and use them for first strike penetration or whatever, to absorb the initial fire or whatever. That sort of thing you could do. So I'm sure we can find good uses for MiG-21s, but I'm not sure if they are the right platform for ISR work. Electronic warfare, I suppose we could find ways of using the MiG-21 for electronic warfare also. Fit them with jammer pods or something, and send them in first before you send in manned fighters. That sort of thing can be done. So I'm sure there are creative ways of repurposing the MiG-21 in beneficial ways, in advantageous ways. But I'm not sure if they're good platforms for ISR work. For other work, yeah, sure, indeed. Fast Snail says, big reason for dirty public places is Gutka stains. Why is it prevalent only in India? What can the government do? In the West, we don't see it. People smoke or vape. Yeah, every culture has its own weird things, right? Now, when it comes to Gutka stains and chewing betel nut and all that, I'll tell you what. Okay, PNG betel nut, Papua New Guinea. Okay, in Papua New Guinea also you have this practice of chewing betel nuts and spitting them out and all that. So it's not like it's only limited to India, but it's a pretty nasty practice, the Gutka is something else. It's not exactly betel nut, but it's part of this practice of chewing things and spitting them out. Betel nuts are used in eating pan, right? And there are various kinds of pan, sweet pan and tobacco pan and what not else pan, whatever. And then the Gutka is this little ghastly little sachets that people, I suppose, they contain tobacco and God knows what else. And people chew that and spit that out and gives them those ghastly red teeth or whatever. Or brown, whatever, right? And obviously, I completely agree that it's a terrible practice. And people who do that, they have this habit of spitting around, right? Spitting in some public corner, somewhere, public place. And that obviously is horrible to see. Those places with those Gutka spit stains. In Western countries, people don't have this this habit, this practice. It's unknown to them. People there typically, I suppose, smoke cigarettes or vape these days, those chemical pouches or whatever. Um, yeah, people. Yeah, in the West, it's not there. That's why the West seems cleaner. It is cleaner. Is cleaner. So, what can the government of India do about Gutka? I suppose you ban Gutka, right? The thing is that I suppose in a large population, there is. I mean, you should allow people to have some vices, right? It's not like you should encourage bad habits, but you recognize the fact that in society a certain number of people will indulge in certain bad habits. That's why alcohol is not banned, cigarettes are not banned, tobacco is not banned. I suppose in India maybe a large number of people do this gutka thing. Looks like that. And if you ban that, maybe you lose votes. If you ban that, people get dissatisfied. um, so what the government does is it taxes these things. And I suppose tobacco products and gutka products are taxed higher percentages than other things. Sin tax, they call it, or whatever. Even I suppose even alcohol. Um, what can the government do? Well, I would say the government should ban this. This is a terrible practice. Terrible. It's bad for your health. It's bad for your teeth. It's bad uh, for public cleanliness and all that. Right? It makes the country look dirty. So ideally, you should ban it, but then you should also ban tobacco, I suppose. And well, that will make a lot of people, I suppose, unhappy. Um, so what can you realistically do? Realistically, what you can do is you can ban spitting. If somebody is caught spitting, they should be fined a large sum of money. And to make this happen, you need proper enforcement. In India, we have laws, we have zero enforcement at times in some places, especially when it comes to these little things like littering and spitting and all that. This, people are never punished for these things, even for violating traffic rules, traffic laws. Who's punished ever? Once in a while, you're punished, but you can get away with a lot of things in India because of lax enforcement. So, what India needs is proper laws and strict enforcement, harsh enforcement. Then things will work. Sergeant Skyland says, can something good come from this Trump term? A lot of good will come for the US. Are you talking about something good for the rest of the world? Well, look, Trump works for his country, of course, right? Every leader is supposed to work for their country, hopefully in mutually beneficial ways with other countries. So a lot of good will come for the US, right? The US gets more powerful. The US throws around its power everywhere, consolidates its Western Hemisphere dominance, um, gets more nations in line, potentially acquires Greenland, and so much more. All that is good for the US. Good for India. Why will Trump do something that's good for India? Why will Trump do something that's good for China? Trump and the US don't want to see India grow and rise. So why will they do anything good for India? They'll pressurize India. They'll pressurize China. They'll pressurize Russia. So whatever good comes out of the Trump term, that good will be good for the US, not for the rest of the world, especially not for India, Russia, or China. That's just the way it is. Hyphen says, does nuclear deterrence still work in a world of cyber warfare and hypersonic weapons? Also, what can India do to stay sovereign and keep growing? Okay, two questions. Does nuclear deterrence still work in a world of cyber warfare? Absolutely, it does. It does. It is madness to launch a nuclear weapon, even with hypersonics or whatever. Right? You can succeed in nuclear war only if you launch a massive, massive first strike that is undetected, and if it is a decapitation strike. And in today's world, with all the surveillance, all the everything, it's impossible to launch a nuclear strike that goes undetected. You have massive networks of satellites all across Earth orbit. You have swaths of ground stations everywhere, whose only job is to detect nuclear launches or missile launches, right? So the moment you see a missile that's launched with a parabolic ballistic trajectory or a near ballistic trajectory, or if you see a missile that has long range capabilities that is being launched, and so you know what are the characteristics of a potential nuclear launch. So So you're going to have a response then. And that is devastating. It's mutually assured destruction. So nuclear deterrence does still work. It does still work. Of course, one can, some actors may gamble, do a tactical strike, or low threshold, low yield strike, maybe 20 kiloton strike or something, on a battlefield, that sort of thing. Can you get away with that sort of thing? I mean, there are all these theories about that, but at the end of the day, a nuclear strike is a nuclear strike, and it's going to invite a response. I think a nuclear deterrence still does work. It does work. Cyber warfare, hypersonics, doesn't matter. It still works. What can India do to stay sovereign and keep growing? First of all, avoid any major conflict. If there's a major conflict, finish it in 3 to 7 days maximum, right? Bolster your military strength. India needs to bolster its military might. India needs to stockpile tens of thousands of missiles, first of all, of various kinds, including ICBMs. Okay? India needs to do that. India needs a stockpile of tens of thousands of missiles. India needs a massive stockpile of ammunition. Okay? India needs to stay abreast of the latest advances in warfare, which primarily we see as lessons of the Ukraine war. Right? Various kinds of drones, autonomous systems, loitering munitions, kamikaze drones, all of that. India, I believe, has reasonably good cyber warfare, offensive, defensive capabilities. India needs to develop a massive navy. India needs to get going on submarines, and also, the Air Force part of things. Of course, if you have high quality missiles, you don't really need that can compensate for any shortfall in terms of fighter jets and all that. And of course, along with this, India needs to keep growing as an economy. At least 6, 7, 8%, at least 6% per year, GDP growth wise. And India is doing the right things by signing FTAs potentially with the European Union and other countries. Excellent work on this front. Excellent work. And at the end of the day, India will need political continuity, political stability, and high quality leadership. And India will need reforms, internal reforms. India needs massive internal reforms, ease of doing business, education, all of those things. Education is completely neglected, but education, the quality of education determines the quality of your people. So all these things need to be done in the next 20 years. Okay. Vijay Vicky says, why is ISRO failing to put strategic satellites in space? Possible sabotage. Only strategic satellites are failing in the recent past. And even for NAVIC satellites, unfunctional now. What could be the cause of this? Well, let's think of the scenarios. So the PSLV, which is used to launch these satellites, it had 21 consecutive successful launches. It had become so successful that a PSLV launch was boring. That is the ultimate accolade you can pay, that your launches are boring, because we know they are so successful. There's no excitement. We know it's going to work. That's how successful the PSLV was. And now we have 2 consecutive failures. Each time, the third stage, something goes wrong. Each time when you have a strategic military satellite, right? And apparently even the NAVIC satellites, let's see about NAVIC. What's the status? How many NAVIC satellites does India have in orbit? How many? 8 operational satellites. Blah, 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 etc. What is the status? The status of India's 8 NAVIC satellites. How many of these are operational? Critical near defunct status. Only 4 of the 11 launch satellites are providing core reliable navigation services, according to Vion and Reddit users. I'm not sure how reliable these things are, but whatever. Atomic clock failures. The atomic clocks, obviously, we are purchasing from the West, and those have failed. So only 4 satellites are fully operational, which is a disaster. Okay, 5 older satellites are completely defunct. And the first next-gen satellite, NVS-01, is operational, but NVS-02 failed to reach its target orbit. What is this NVS-02? satellite. 29 Jan. Okay. What happened? 29 Jan. What happened to it? Was it launched? Launch fuel system failure. It was launched on GSLV F-15, 29 January, and this failed. This failed. So even the GSLV is suffering problems. That's where we are. That's pretty bad situation. So is ISRO failing somehow, or is there sabotage? Now, some of you may remember a year or two ago, I had put out this video analysis in which I said that there is a strong possibility that the Chandrayaan 2 spacecraft was sabotaged. And this analysis faced a lot of criticism from various experts. And today we have this happening. 2 consecutive PSLV launches have failed. Our NAVIC system is essentially only 4 out of 11 satellites are operational. One of the NAVIC satellites was launched on GSLV. That did not reach orbit. Looks like critical systems, critical satellites that push the envelope are being targeted. I think there is a very high possibility there is sabotage. Maybe spies inside the system, maybe moles inside the system, maybe some kind of some way of potentially hacking or sabotaging the launches, the vehicles, or something from outside. Most likely not from outside, most likely internal sabotage. Looks like that's a very strong possibility. I'm not claiming it's 100% certain that there is internal sabotage of some kind. I'm saying there seems like it from a logical perspective, I think it's highly possible. From a logical perspective, there's a high probability that there is sabotage that's going on. And India needs to get its act together. Whatever sabotage may or may not be happening, look into it. If it is indeed sabotage, hypothetically, identify the source of the sabotage, apprehend whatever people may possibly be involved in this, right? So yeah, this is a very serious situation, and yeah, very concerning for sure. Very concerning. What's also concerning is that ISRO is launching like 5 rockets a year. 5 rockets a year. SpaceX is launching like 5 rockets a week. And ISRO is launching 5 rockets a year. Is it ISRO's fault? No, it's the government's fault. The government seems to have zero ambitions now in India for India in space. I don't know what's going on. Seriously. Baffling. Absolutely baffling. It's like ISRO is no longer in the space race. We've given up on space. Who cares? Who cares? Doesn't matter, right? Crazy. Madness. Keshav says, if the US seeks a land border to base its military infrastructure and project power against China, why haven't they gone after Bhutan? Too high. What? A land border to base military infrastructure and project power against China. If the US puts things in Bhutan, China will take over Bhutan the next day. I mean, we are not in kindergarten here, right? It has to be feasible. If the US puts personnel or equipment or weapons, military infrastructure in Bhutan, China will invade the next morning and take over Bhutan. And why will Bhutan allow this to happen? Why? You think Bhutan's available to whoever wants to do whatever stuff? Bhutan seeks to continue existing. Bhutan knows China is its biggest threat. Bhutan knows that India is the only nation that can save Bhutan and continue Bhutan's existence. Why will Bhutan invite retaliation from China by doing something so stupid? If the Chinese invade Bhutan, do you think the Americans can save Bhutan? I mean, think logically. Think beyond the surface level. What happens if the US does this? What happens if Bhutan is so stupid it allows Americans to put some weapons in Bhutan and some personnel? What happens next? What will China's response be? Have you thought of that? And if China invades, let's say, then what will the Americans be able to do? Does America have a land border with Bhutan so that it can do something? Can America project power in the Bhutan region? Will India allow Bhutan to allow the Americans to put weapons there or whatever there? I mean, think of it. Think of it. Let's think seriously here, right? Okay. Raza Ali Shirazi says, greeting from the land of Nadir Shah. You'll remember him. Nadir Shah was a one real son of a bitch, wasn't he? Nadir Shah. High quality bastard was he was, Nadir Shah. Okay. Aman Kumar Dankar says, reminder, Mr. Bukram Sood, best time for Mr. Ram Devedi also. All right, sir. Thank you for the reminders. Thank you. Chirag Srinath says, hi Kushal. I think this is not for me. Who's Kushal? This is not Kushal. I am pretty sure this is, you have put this question on the wrong channel. I think you are looking for Kushal Mehra. Not me. Would you like me to take this question? Because this is not for me. Let's take it anyway. My name is Abhijit. Abhijit, by the way. Abhijit. Not Kushal. I appeared on Kushal's channel a few days ago. This is Abhijit here. Okay. Can India become rich within its current framework? Most countries industrialized under strong state control and democratized later in the 90s. Is India trying to do too much at once? You are absolutely right. Take the example of South Korea, for example. South Korea industrialized under strong state control, democratized only later. South Korea used to be a dictatorship. Only after it properly industrialized did it become supposedly a democracy. Under US occupation, of course, but still on paper a democracy. And there are plenty of such examples, right? India has never had that strong state control that can properly industrialize it. India is this chaotic democracy, isn't it? Where you have states that have at times more power than the center. The states can veto the center if the center wants to, let's say, open up some industries in a certain state. They can say, no, our farmers protest, our annadatas protest, and we will not allow this to happen. We want to remain dirt poor. We don't want industries here. And it works. And then other states will say, okay, bring it here. We'll benefit. This sort of system doesn't work. India will have to significantly reform things if India wants to be rich and powerful. The current framework is loaded against India. It's like the system is rigged against India. The system wants to ensure that India doesn't succeed. The system is designed to keep India mediocre and poor. Yeah. So India is not trying to do too much at once. India is trying to do everything within the confines and boundaries and constraints of the worst system imaginable. So you are right. It can't work, and that's why India needs reforms, massive reforms, which I keep saying. Chirag Srinath says, can India become rich within its current chaotic framework? Most countries industrialized under strong state control in the 50s and 60s. Yeah, I just answered this question. It is very hard for India to become rich and powerful within the current chaotic framework. I agree with you. It's very hard. Things have to change. Okay. Naveen says, the dome of Imam Ali Shrine, Iraq, and the open curved arches and Ivans of Muntasiriya Madarasa, Iraq, resemble similar architecture of Taj Mahal, and both of them built centuries before Taj Mahal. Thank you very much for the very interesting observation. Shivansh says, Western folks on X often make fun of Indians, saying they are the true Aryans, with pics of Indians with dominant AASI features underneath. What's the apt report to make them shut? The apt report is to either mute them or block them and move on with your life. Who cares what they say? Who cares what they say? How does it? Why do you need external validation? Why? Let them say. I mean, you're walking on a street and dogs bark at you. You're gonna go after the dogs? Are you? You're gonna move on with life, right? How do we care what they say? You can't fight them all. So my point, I mean, it's not like I don't see this. I just move on. But if you want to, I mean, look, it's very easy to sell a lie, an oversimplification of things, when the response is complicated. So if you want to respond to these folks, okay, then you have to explain the details. You have to explain that this Aryan invasion slash migration theory is a myth. You have to explain that it was cooked up by Max Muller with the 4,000 year creation story of Jesus Christ and God, Yahweh, and all that in mind. So he put an arbitrary date of 1500 BC for the Aryan invasion, which has no basis in anything, any concrete truth. Then you have to show how all the claims of the Aryan invasion theory are false, which is why they had to create an Aryan migration theory. And then you have to show how the facts of the Aryan migration theory are also false. Then you have to show that India has tremendous genetic diversity, the second highest genetic diversity outside of Africa, which is why you have people of so many different kinds of facial features and so on. So you have to write a long essay to counter one picture, one meme. Do you have the time to do all this? Right? These people seek to waste your time and energy. I would say just move on. Ignore such people. Block them or mute them or ignore them. That's it. Chirag Srinath says, I was curious if you have paused your podcasts as I haven't seen any recent episodes. If you plan to restart them, it would be great to have Abhijit Mitra and Ram Dwivedi back on the show. I have kind of, I've not entirely stopped the podcasts. I have kind of reduced the frequency. I've done more than 100 now. And I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. So there are some really, really great guests that I've had. One of them is Abhijit Mitra, obviously, Dr. Meenakshi Jain, and I'm sure I can name a few more great guests who were outstanding, and whom I would love to have on my show, on the podcast again. But I've also realized that a lot of the times, many times, I've realized during the conversations that I'm not sure why I call this person, because I kind of know more than them. So that's why I have decided to now bring the frequency of the podcast episodes down. It's not gonna be, it used to be like once a week or twice a week earlier, I think once a week at least, right? Now it's gonna be once in whenever I feel like. Only when I happen to speak to somebody really interesting who really has something really valuable to contribute that I can't contribute. Right? So it's gonna be there once in a while. But yeah, so that's the status right now. It's not stopped, it's not paused, it's kind of a little infrequent right now. That's where we are. Munna Bhaiya says, IG, V, JPY, Modi, who played better geopolitics against US and China? IG, Indira Gandhi. V, what's a V? Who's a V? VJP, Vajpayee, Modi, who played better geopolitics against US and China? Indira Gandhi, well, she did a great thing by bifurcating Pakistan, vivisecting Pakistan. That's one of the greatest military achievements since 1947. So, full marks for that. Vajpayee, well, without Vajpayee, we would not have a nuclear deterrent today. So, he showed a spine of steel in going ahead with the nuclear tests in 1998. Mrs. Gandhi also had conducted nuclear tests in 1974. But then she, for whatever reason, shelved the nuclear program. Mr. Vajpayee reactivated it and then converted that into an actual active nuclear deterrent, right? And Mr. Modi has taken Indian foreign policy to the next level, obviously, right? Over the years, over the past 11, 12 years. He has totally sidelined Pakistan, shown a very hard stance against Pakistan, the kind of stance no other leader has done in the past. And he has expanded India's economy significantly, had this multi-aligned foreign policy that has worked very well for India. So I would say all three of these leaders have done a lot of good, a lot of great, at least some good and some great. But overall, I would say that of all the Indian prime ministers I am aware of that we've had since 47, overall, cumulatively, Mr. Modi has been the most successful in terms of foreign policy, geopolitics, etc. Yeah. Vivek Singh says non-UNSC, the UN Security Council, non-UN Security Council nations are joining the Board of Peace. Is it going to be a competitor of the UN, or will it fade away like the League of Nations? Do you see a EU-US conflict soon? So Donald J. Trump, American president, 47th president, he has constituted this Board of Peace thing. There's a bunch of nations in the Board of Peace. So what does this tell us? Is this going to be a competitor to the United Nations, or is it going to fade out? Look, one thing it tells us is that the United Nations is failing as a global institution. It's not able to guarantee the peace in any region. The UN is able to do nothing when it comes to Gaza. What was the UN able to do? Nothing. The UN is a failure. The UN is increasingly irrelevant, almost completely irrelevant. So Trump constituting a board of peace that will actually guarantee the peace in Gaza, it is a slap in the face of the UN. It shows the world the UN is irrelevant. So that much is definitely established, and that is definitely something that Trump has already achieved through this board of peace. Now, if you look at the kind of nations that have joined the board of peace, you have nations like Turkey and Pakistan, which doesn't give a lot of credibility to the board of peace. Pakistan, a terrorist regime. Turkey, enabler of terrorism, supporter of ISIS. You have such nations in the board of peace. So these are all opportunists who seek to curry favor with Donald J. Trump and achieve something for themselves. And Shahbaz Sharif and Asim Munir, it's not like they're doing something for Pakistan. They're doing it for their own benefit. Dictators, tin pot dictators. Well, Shahbaz Sharif is the puppet, essentially. He is Asim Munir's puppet. He's the stand-in for Asim Munir. So that's the board of peace. And if you want to be a permanent member, you have to pay $1 billion. And even then, Trump is the lifelong chairman of the board of peace, that sort of thing. So it's kind of a circus to some extent. So will the board of peace last? It can last only if it has global recognition. If it can last only if it has recognition from nations like India, Russia, China. Right? Only then will it be legitimate. If outside of the US, the three biggest economies stay out, or the three most powerful nations, not biggest economies, three most powerful nations apart from the US stay out, then it doesn't get any real legitimacy. So I expect that if India, Russia, China don't join, then this thing will eventually fade out. Do I see a EU-US conflict soon? I don't. Not of war. There's obviously tensions and so on, but not of war. Not a military conflict. Hyphen 6552 says, sorry for multiple questions, but will climate change become a primary driver of conflict? No. That's the first answer. No, it won't. Or a threat multiplier. It could potentially multiply threats if there is massive effects of climate change, like floods or massive, natural disasters. Also, are human rights promoted for moral reasons or as tools of leverage? Okay, about climate change, it won't be a primary driver of conflict, but it could be a threat multiplier in some geographies. For example, it could be a threat multiplier in a geography that is, for example, prone to regular earthquakes. It obviously is something that you have to mitigate or consider as part of your lifestyle. And if there's a conflict there, it obviously is going to have effects. Let's say you have a region that's prone to volcanism, the Ring of Fire region, where there you're going to have issues, right? It can be a major driver for a threat multiplier for low-lying countries in the oceanic countries like Maldives. If the ocean levels do rise, we don't see that happening, but if they do rise, then it's going to be a threat. It could be a threat for Bangladesh, and then it could drive conflict. If the ocean levels rise, like say 3-4 meters in the next 20-30 years, if that happens. But that is, well, if that happens, that sort of thing. So it depends on the geography, on the country, on the local politics, and so much more. Now, are human rights promoted for moral reasons or as tools of leverage? Well, human rights ideally should be promoted for moral reasons, because human rights should be sacrosanct wherever you have human beings. But If you look at the champions of human rights like the United States, they use human rights as a tool of leverage. They use human rights as a stick to beat certain nations with. So they will. So when it comes to, let's say, the US attempting regime change in Syria, well, they supported ISIS and Al Qaeda, or the moderate rebels. Al Qaeda are the moderate rebels. ISIS are nasty, but we will turn the other way while they do this stuff. That sort of thing. And today, you have an ISIS terrorist who is the so-called president of Syria, and he meets with Donald Trump. What happened to your human rights? But when it comes to other countries, they will use so-called human rights challenges or whatever, based on whatever reports they put out, as a stick to beat the country with. So it's all tools of leverage. Vipul Pawar says, is interior reconstructible from boundary data? You're talking about the holographic principle, are you? I mean, I'm sure you're talking about physics here, aren't you? Boundary data. Let's talk about black holes, for example. Okay, so if you have an uncharged, non-rotating black hole, it's called a Schwarzschild black hole. Okay, and it's the solution to the Einstein field equations is a perfectly spherically symmetric solution. So it's a spherical black hole. It's not rotating. It doesn't have angular momentum, and let's say it has no charge. Typically, black holes have very little charge, if any at all. But okay, so then you have a spherical object which seems to contain at the center, at its heart, a singularity. And the singularity is a probably mathematical artifact, but it's not a coordinate artifact. It's an actual physical singularity from the equations, which means the equations break down to the center. You have a region of infinite curvature, infinite density, which is unphysical. It's division by zero, which actually indicates that there's something somewhat wrong with the equations. It needs an improvement of some kind, which means there's physics that we don't understand there. Now at the surface, what is the surface of a black hole? So when you are falling into a black hole, do you see some kind of signboard? Hey, here is the point of no return. You don't see anything. The surface is an imaginary surface. It's called the event horizon. Okay? And you can construct this boundary at the event horizon, and there, so the holographic principle says that this two-dimensional surface, it encodes all the information that's inside the black hole in some scrambled, encrypted form or whatever. That's the holographic principle. But can you reconstruct the interior from the boundary data? I'm not sure we can. I don't think we can. I mean, I would like to know what's at the heart of the black hole. What does the singularity look like? Do we actually have a singularity? So the boundary data doesn't really tell us anything about the singularity. Whatever we know of the interior of a black hole is from the solutions of the Einstein field equations. The holographic data, the surface boundary information. So one thing we know is that the surface area of the boundary of the event horizon, it is proportional to the entropy of the black hole, the amount of, let's say, disorder in the black hole. Okay, that's one thing we know. That's black hole thermodynamics. But can we determine whatever is inside the black hole, how many photons went in, how many neutrinos went in, how many charged particles, atoms, whatever went in? Can we do that from the boundary data? We can't. At this point in time, we can't. Okay, Died in Plane Crash says, your opinion on Soviet ekranoplanes. Soviet ekranoplanes were these gigantic hoverboards. What's a hovercraft? Hovercrafts. So what's a hovercraft, first of all? So a hovercraft is this, essentially it's a floating vehicle that floats on a cushion of air, and it has these propellers which propel it forward. So it's this vehicle that you can drive over land or even sea. You can drive it across a river. It will be floating on a cushion of air, and you can just drive it over a river. You can drive it across over a sea. And these ekranoplanes were gigantic hovercrafts, and those could carry dozens of troops, maybe hundreds of troops, maybe even vehicles, very large. So let's see what these looked like. First of all, what does a hovercraft look like? So a hovercraft, it looks like this. Okay, we have hovercraft services in various parts of India. This is a small one. This is a medium-sized hovercraft. As you can see, it's traveling over a river or water. This one is on land. So typically, you use it to essentially travel over water. Now, what does an ecranoplan look like? So it was this gigantic hovercraft beast. Okay, you could use it to launch invasions. You can see how many engines it had. 8 engines. And I suppose these were heavily armed too. You can see these missile tubes or whatever. Right? This is another, the Caspian Sea monster. Massive, massive, beastly object. So you had these ekranoplans. I'm not sure how many were built. I'm pretty sure not very many were built. This is DARPA. Okay, forget about DARPA. So these were massive designs. I don't remember what the strategic or tactical use of these was. And a few of these were built, but these were eventually abandoned, and they are no longer in operation. The Chinese have ekranoplan like vehicles, hovercrafts that can potentially be used for an invasion of Taiwan. Okay, that sort of thing. So that's what I know about ekranoplans. Very interesting a vehicle, military vehicle that the Soviets built. I'm sure it's a good concept and can still be adapted for 21st century warfare, especially for amphibious invasions and expeditionary warfare. Okay. Okay. So if, for example, if India wants to practice an invasion of some country, some hypothetical country, then you could take off from, let's say, Vishakhapatnam or whatever on an ekranoplan like vehicle and practice an invasion of the Andaman Islands, just for practice purpose. Andamans are anyway ours, but you practice. So you could do that if you had ekranoplan like vehicles. Maybe each ekranoplan could potentially carry, let's say, 100 troops or 200 troops. Launch 10 of these and you have a pretty good invasion force, Marines, that sort of thing. Shivansh says, have you read Mr. Ambedkar? Do you subscribe to any of his ideas? I unfortunately have not read any of Dr. Ambedkar, so I am not aware of his ideas. Right? There are so many historical figures, fascinating historical figures, very important historical figures. So many of these in past history. So many of these that it's impossible to study each of them. And I have never had the opportunity or the time, or somehow it's never happened that I got the chance to read about Dr. Ambedkar. So I am not aware of his ideas in any great detail. Chaitanya on Tech says, since inception, has the US always interfered in other countries' affairs? When did this start? Well, the US. So first of all, what was the inception of the US? The inception of the United States was Europeans interfering in the internal affairs of the Americas. See, Columbus set out from Spain in the hope of discovering India. And he stumbled into the Caribbean region. And he thought this was India. I discovered India. He goes back to Spain and says, I found the Indies. I found India, and so on. Eventually, the Spanish realize that this is not India. It's a new land that they've found. Eventually, they find La Florida, the flowered coast, which is now Florida. And then eventually, it's the English who first resort to piracy, and then they actually go and settle down. You first have Jamestown, which the Americans don't want to talk about because it was a disaster, nasty disaster. And then you have Plymouth in what is now the Massachusetts region. And then they invade this land and massacre the natives, genocide the natives, and set up eventually the United States. It was first British colonies, and then 1776 you have the formation of the United States. So this was the formation of the US. The creation of the US was the theft of land from the natives and the decimation, genocide of the natives. And then you have further westward expansion at the cost of the lives and territories of the natives. But this was interference in the internal affairs of the native people of the Americas, who hardly exist at all anymore. And then they stole territory from Mexico in the 19th century. What, 1848 was it? US Mexico War. When did it happen? Let's quickly take a look. Okay. US Mexico War. 46. Okay, I was off by 2 years. It ended in 48. So how do you have territories in the US that are called Colorado, Texas, California? These are Spanish names, right? These were all Mexican territories, which was Mexico was once called New Spain. And then in what, 1823, the Americans instituted this foreign policy called the Monroe Doctrine, that we won't allow any European power to interfere in the Americas anymore. That was obviously interference in the internal affairs of other South American nations, Central American nations, and so on. So it's always been that sort of thing. See, the United States was founded by invaders and occupiers, European invaders and occupiers. And what was in their blood? Invasion and occupation and plunder and pillage and theft. That's how Australia was created. Australia was once populated only by native people, the so-called Aboriginal people. Where are they today? What happened to the natives of Tasmania? Not a single one is alive today. This is what the Anglo-Saxons have done across the world. Interference in other countries' affairs, theft of countries, theft of land, genocide, plunder, pillage. What did they do in India? The same Anglo-Saxons. They artificially engineered hundreds of famines and killed hundreds of millions of Indians. Your textbooks won't teach you this. So when I say this, people will question me. What are you talking about? You're going crazy. Your textbooks won't teach you this. Your NCERT revisions, do they teach you how many artificial famines the British engineered? How did they engineer the famine step by step? And how many Indians were killed as a consequence? They won't teach you this. This is the problem. Okay, Sharan says, is Al-Idris really that great? I'm sorry, who? Who is Al-Idris? Let's see. Who is Al-Idris? Muhammad Al-Idrisi. I haven't studied the life and the story of Muhammad Al-Idrisi. Abu Abdullah Muhammad Al-Idrisi Al-Qurtubi Al-Hassani As-Sabti. What? Was an Arab Muslim geographer and cartographer who served in the court of King Roger II at Palermo, Sicily. He was born in Ceuta, belonging to the Al-Muravid dynasty. Okay, I am not aware of this fine gentleman, so I don't know. Sorry. Right, next. Giora TV says, isn't it a good idea that to fix India's language dispute in the future, all major regional languages should be taught in schools? Aren't so many years enough for kids to learn a few languages? So see, it's I would say it's on paper a good idea, but think of it practically. Let's say you're a kid in some state in India. Let's say you are a kid in Andhra Pradesh. So typically what a kid goes through in school is that you have to learn the native language as one of the subjects. Then you have to learn Hindi as the national language, that's the second one. And if you're in the English medium, you have to learn English, the third language. So out of your 7 or 8 subjects, 3 are languages. And you learn this year after year, first standard, second standard, third standard, blah, 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 10th standard, all the way, I suppose, to 12th standard. 12 years of your life, you're learning 3 languages. When you could have spent that time learning something way more interesting if you only had to learn 1 language. So if you make kids learn 5 languages, 6 languages, what else will they have time for to learn? That's the problem. That's the problem. You should have one. See, in my opinion, you should be taught 2 languages. One is your native language, your mother tongue. Your education should be in your mother tongue, not in a foreign language. And apart from your mother tongue, you should be taught one national or civilizational language, which in my opinion should be Sanskrit. And there should be no foreign language taught to any kid. If they want to learn some foreign language, whether it is French, whether it's German, whether it's Chinese, Japanese, Swahili, whatever, let them learn in their own free time as a hobby. No one's stopping you from learning a foreign language. But in the Indian education system, you should be taught, instructed in the mother tongue, and you should be taught the civilizational language Sanskrit. That's it. So if you are a kid from Karnataka, your education should be in the Kannada language, And you should be taught one language apart from that, which is Sanskrit. If you are from Assam, you should be taught in the Assamese language, all your education. And apart from that, you should be taught Sanskrit. That way, everybody has one language that everyone can communicate in, which is the civilizational language. And you are also being instructed in the mother tongue, which makes your education so much easier. That's what should be done. Teaching 500 different languages it's pointless. It's pointless. Our civilization always had this issue that we have so many languages. We are a genuine civilization. We are like a continent in our own right. Hundreds of languages spoken around and thousands of dialects. So how did we solve the problem? By having a single civilizational language that everybody understood everywhere. Or at least the educated people, highly educated people understood everywhere. So you could travel across the country and no matter what language people spoke, you could communicate. That's what needs to happen instead of having all kinds of languages taught. That's my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with that. Rahul Laddu says, which tech should India gain very urgently? India should, which tech? First of all, India should develop its own large language models and AI systems, indigenous, trained on indigenous sovereign data. I have no issue with us scraping the entire world's internet and getting the data, but it should be trained on our terms. That's what needs to happen. So we need to have our own large language models, our own AI systems. See, and not necessarily large language models. Some should be LLMs. Some should be trained on something else. You have data apart from text data, right? You have video data. You have got audio visual data. Train your AI models on all kinds of data, not just text, which is LLMs. That's one thing that's urgently required in India, because we are not even participating in the AI races of now. We're not, right? You may have significant AI penetration in India, but that doesn't mean we are a leading AI nation. We are not a leader. We are not even second rank. We are not even in the second category. We're nowhere right now. I hope some work is being done, and let's see the results first instead of boasting. That's one thing India needs to do. What other technologies? Jet engine technology. Obviously, that needs to happen rapidly. What else? Materials science, miniaturization of nuclear reactors for submarines and so on. India is behind in many technologies. We should catch up with all of these urgently. India needs to also become a major player in the space race. So what technology is needed for that? Heavy lift rockets. We currently have light lift rockets. Our most powerful rocket, the GSLV, can lift 4,000 kilograms to geosynchronous orbits, which is a respectable amount. But compared to the big players, it's okay. So a lot of these things need to happen. Pratham Soni says 5 rules of power and its nature for nation and individual. 5 rules of power. It's been a while since I've thought about the rules of power. Power. How do I explain power? Power is like a force. Okay, power. I don't know about 5 rules of power. Okay, but power is what is power, first of all? Do we even know what power is? Instead of giving you 5 rules of power, let me explain what power actually is. So one easy metaphor I can give you is this. Let's say I have 1 million followers on social media. Let's say I have 1 million followers across social media. That means that about 1 million people will sometimes pay attention to me and sometimes take some of what I say seriously. Sometimes. It means that I have some influence over these people. I may not have full influence over all of them, but some of them find me interesting or whatever. That's why they follow me. And sometimes they'll take me seriously. At least some of what I say seriously. That is influence. That is not power. But let's say I have 1 million guys. Let's say I have 1 million people who are highly trained, heavily armed, and who will obey me without question. That is power. Huge difference between power and influence. So the power, what is the meaning of power? The power is the ability to compel outcomes, whether someone likes or not. That's power. And then you can figure out what are the rules of power based on that. So that's what I'll tell you at this point in time. Fast Snail says, what if China proposes to send troops to help Russia just like North Korea did? So they are battle tested. Would Russia welcome it? Would West see a red flag? That's an interesting hypothetical scenario. So let's say China has decided, for whatever reason, we'll send troops to help Russia, just like North Korea did. And we want our troops to be battle tested, and Russia gets additional troops who will fight on its behalf. Would Russia welcome it? Would West see a red flag? I think Russia would be very cautious about this. And I don't think Russia will be cautious about this because they are worried about the Western reaction. No. Russia will be cautious about this because they will be worried about the presence of Chinese troops in close proximity or in contact with Russian troops, with access to Russian military equipment. Because the Chinese troops will be spies. Russia will see it as a red flag, not the West. The West may be happy, actually. Okay, the Chinese are playing games with Russia now. They'll be happy. I think Russia will see this as a red flag. And they may not be in a position to say no to China, but they would be extremely cautious about this. So Russia would probably not reject this, but they may impose special conditions on the Chinese troops. They'll have to negotiate a deal as to what kind of operational measures will be taken and what kind of operational freedom the Chinese troops will be given. I don't think China will agree to Chinese troops being under Russian command, because that is a sovereignty red flag. I think this is a highly unlikely scenario. I think China, first of all, won't propose this. And even if they propose it, Russia may be very, very cautious or suspicious about such a proposal from China. Would the West see a red flag if Russia accepted? I think they would see a red flag anyway. Yeah. And that would actually give the West multiple excuses to sanction China. And China doesn't need this right now or want this at this time. So that's where we are. Okay. Geora TV says, do you think that India possesses or is in the process of having space-based DEWs? There's chatter about some Project Kali. What's a DEW? Directed energy weapon. What's a directed energy weapon? It's typically weapons that use photons as a weapon. What's a photon? A photon is a quantum of light. It's a wave packet. Essentially, it's like lasers. Okay? Lasers. What's laser? It's just light. Light emission by synchronized emission of radiation. Right? Yeah, laser. Yeah, kind of. So, population inversion, whatnot. I don't know. Okay, that's not relevant here. So, a laser is a directed energy weapon. You use energy in the form of light, okay, as the weapon. And you can have various kinds of such weapons. So the question then is, so that now we've understood what a directed energy weapon is. It's like a light beam, essentially, or a beam of photons. It could be ultraviolet, infrared, whatever. But energy, which is being used as a weapon. So that's a DEI. Now, does India have space-based DEIs? I think India does have land-based DEIs. Very powerful land-based DEIs. Space-based, I doubt it very much. First of all, let's see what kind of land-based DEIs India has. India directed energy weapons. So we do have DRDO projects like Kali microwaves, Surya high-powered lasers, Sahastra Shakti, weapon-mounted laser, etc. We have pretty powerful DEIs. Kiloampere linear injector uses electron beams to generate microwaves to soft-kill electronics and drones and missiles with potential for future upgrades. Sahastra Shakti, 30 kilowatt vehicle-mounted laser system that successfully neutralized drones. So it's been tested up to 5 kilometers away, demonstrating real-world capability. Surya, 300 kilowatt high-power laser system targeting aerial threats like missiles at longer ranges up to 20 kilometers. Very, very, very good. Excellent. I like it. Aditya, gas dynamic laser demonstrator on a vehicle for terminal missile defense. Laser dazzlers. Okay, that's fine for crowd control. Durga 2. We're not sure what that is. Directionally unrestricted ray gun array. Yeah, so all these strategic objectives, what you can do with it. And the great thing is that you don't need ammunition for this. You just need energy. Accumulated capacitors and all that. Okay, you don't need ammunition for this. Now, these are pretty massive systems, okay? And typically this would weigh hundreds of kilograms potentially. How do you launch that into space? Yeah, sure, we can launch several hundred kilograms into space, even thousands of kilograms. But we most likely don't have that. So recently we've been trying to launch some military satellites or critical strategic satellites into space, and it's not worked out very well. And we hardly launch 5 or 6 space missions a year, and we typically announce what the space missions are. And it's not always military satellites. It's sometimes your standard communication satellites, or sometimes something like Chandrayaan or Mangalyaan or whatever. So I therefore doubt very strongly that we have any space-based directed energy weapons. If India was a nation that launched dozens of space missions a year, then we could easily quietly launch something and not, people won't realize. But when you launch just 5 or 6 space missions a year, everything is scrutinized, and it's very, very, very hard to camouflage the launch of a DEI system into space. So I doubt that India has space-based DEIs. Vihang Khurane says, India is developing ramjet-powered artillery shells. If it is successful, how significant will it be for our defense capabilities? My super chat, but watching since 5 years, I learned a lot. Oh, outstanding! Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having been a viewer for 5 years. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Right. So, I've heard recently the news came out that we are developing ramjet-powered artillery shells. So, what's a ramjet? A ramjet is a special kind of propulsion system. What's the application? What's the application of ramjets? One example is BrahMos. The BrahMos missile employs ramjet engines, and this ramjet engine on a BrahMos missile accelerates it to Mach 2, which is twice the speed of sound. Right? It's a pretty massive missile, and with this powerful engine that accelerates the missile to Mach 2. So ramjet technology, ramjet engines accelerate projectiles to very high speeds, typically Mach 2, sometimes Mach 3 also. And then one step beyond ramjets is scramjets, which is supersonic combusting ramjets, which takes you to Mach 5 plus. So the news is that India is developing ramjet-powered artillery shells. So what's an artillery shell? It's a projectile that is shot out of a cannon or an artillery or a howitzer or an artillery piece, right? So what does an artillery shell look like? Let me first show that, okay? Artillery shell. So that's what an artillery shell typically looks like. Yeah, it's got this streamlined aerodynamic shape. And you have artillery shells that come in different sizes and shapes. Mostly the shapes are similar, but the sizes are different. And then you have artillery shells with fins and whatnot. And some artillery shells don't typically have a motor, an engine that propels it. It doesn't leave behind a jet. It's simply shot out of the tube of the artillery piece, and that's it. And then it just goes on a ballistic trajectory and impacts the destination. But now we have this artillery shell which will have ramjets. So what that does is it's going to extend the range of the artillery shell. It's going to kind of turn the artillery shell into an extended rocket kind of thing. and the power it delivers, the speed at which it will impact the target is going to be higher than a typical artificial. So what's the advantage of this? First of all, extended range. Let's say you have an artillery gun that can fire a shell to 20 kilometers, but maybe with a ramjet you can fire it to maybe 30 kilometers, maybe 40 kilometers. I don't know what the specifics are, but it extends the range. If you have an artillery shell with that sort of range, you may be able to possibly double the range, maybe even beyond that. Who knows? That's one thing. And secondly, the kinetic energy it carries will be higher because it's traveling faster. So that sort of thing, yeah. So it's obviously good for our defense capabilities. It's not a game changer, but it's definitely excellent, right? Okay. So yeah, thank you, Vihang, for the super chat, and nice to have finally had communication with you. Thank you. Just Kidding says namaste, sir. Well, namaste, Ji. Namaste back to you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hani Sharma says, I know you don't watch Indian movies, but you must watch Tumbad. Tumbad. I used to think it was Tumbad, based on the English spelling, Tumbad. I was like, what does Tumbad mean? But then someone told me it is Tumbad. Okay. Yeah. And so you must watch Tumbad, and it's based on Indian goddess and monsters. It's a beautifully crafted movie. Please watch. Yeah. I never got the opportunity to watch it on the big screen, and I've heard a lot of really good things about it. Like, it's one of India's finest movies, a genuinely world-class movie. Apparently a frightening movie and scary horror stuff. Oh, I'm so scared. But yeah, thank you for the recommendation. I will certainly watch it. It's been on my watch list for like a few years, but I somehow never got around to watching it. So thank you for the reminder. I will certainly find the time to watch that movie. Thank you. Slow Cheetah. Well, we had Fast Snail, now we have Slow Cheetah. I love this creative usernames. Okay. Which Indian emperor was strong in terms of power projection? Oh, well. See, when we talk about power projection in the modern day era, we're talking about missiles, we're talking about military bases, we're talking about naval bases across the world. We're talking about satellite systems. We're talking about cyber capabilities, right? 20th century and 21st century technologies. That's what has enabled nations like the US, especially the US, to project power globally. Now, you go back to the 19th century, the only way to project power was by having a very powerful and capable navy, and using that navy to enforce the control of sea lanes and the protection of strategically placed ports. And those ports would also serve as points of extraction from the colonies, from the occupied nations. Like, you had ports in India, which were places from which all the resources of India were extracted out of India and sent to various parts of the world. So that's how you did power projection. Now in India, so that's 18th, 19th centuries. Before that, you had traders, like Indian traders who would trade with East Africa, etc. But those were trading missions. Those were not power projection missions. So if you ask me what Indian emperor was strong in terms of power projection, who was the last great Indian emperor? The last great Indian empire was the Maratha Empire. And it was one of the great advantages it had was it had a very powerful navy. So the Maratha Empire was able to project power across India's coastline. Right? So that's one. Apart from that, the Gupta emperors had pretty powerful navies. Obviously, there was no air force back in the day. You had infantry, you had cavalry, and you had navy. So when Samudragupta conquered the Deccan region all the way to the southern part of India, it was a two-pronged invasion. It was a land-based invasion plus a sea-based invasion. So Samudragupta was very powerful in that sense. Apart from that, power projection was all land-based. When it comes to, for example, I suppose various Indian emperors also were able to project power through naval means into the Strait of Hormuz, etc. But most of those records have disappeared. We've lost those. But yeah, we did have that. During the time of the Mahakshatrapas, the Indo-Scythian rulers of Western India, especially Gujarat, Saurashtra, Maharashtra, that region, even Rajasthan and so on. Those Mahakshatrapa rulers like Rudra Daman, etc., Nahapana, Chashtana, Rudra Daman, etc., these great kings, they also had powerful navies. They controlled the great western ports of India, the ports in Gujarat and Saurashtra, through which we traded with the West. And that's why the Mahakshatrapas were very powerful and very wealthy. And then the Gupta emperors took over that part of India. They defeated the Mahakshatrapas. So back in the day, power projection was mainly naval. And when it comes to an emperor like Kanishka, his power projection was all land-based. So those days we did not have air force. We had some navy. That's why power projection was limited. Not just in India, everywhere in the world. Okay. Titu says, your review on Yajnadevam work, now expert try to review his work, even Kushal. Look, I haven't studied his work in detail. I have had him on my podcast. And I think he's legit. He has so the work he has done, okay? The work he's done is essentially the decipherment. Let me find that, okay? Give me a second. It is the decipherment of the so-called Indus Valley or Harappan script. And he's done it through cryptographic means, by treating the problem as a cryptographic problem. And that's a scientific way of doing it, a logical way of doing it. And I'm pretty sure that what the work he has done is legitimate. So if you want to know what podcast it is on my channel, if you look here, it is this one, ACP 91, Abhijit Chavda podcast 91, a year ago. This one here. So if you're interested, do watch that. So I think his work is legit. I think his work is great. But I haven't studied it in like rigorously and gone through his entire process, because I've never had the time to do that. But it makes the most sense to me. Okay, it's the same question all over again. Okay, I just answered that. All right, thank you, sir. Titu, thank you. Naveen Chauhan says, India's information warfare or narrative remains weak across X, Instagram, YouTube, in Reddit. Even Pakistan outperforms us in narrative coordination. Why? Because the government doesn't consider this, for whatever reason, to be important. When it comes to the Pakistani narrative warfare approach, well, it's the government of Pakistan that's involved in this. When it comes to the Chinese narrative warfare strategy, the government funds this and coordinates this. The Chinese government does it. In the case of India, it is individuals who do it. The government simply is not interested. Why is the government of India not interested in fighting a narrative war on social media? I don't have the faintest clue. Every nation has a propaganda outlet, right? The BBC, it is the British propaganda outlet. The Americans have multiple. CNN, Fox News, they have various print or internet outlets like whatever, New York Times, Washington Post, etc. The Chinese have CCTN or whatever. Every nation, the Germans have Deutsche Welle, the French have France 24. Every nation has these BBCs, their version of the BBC. India has nothing. India simply doesn't care about fighting a narrative war. The government of India, it has had all these years to do something about it. They simply don't care. I don't know why they don't care. We have this information and broadcasting ministry. Why do we have it? Why? I don't get it. So the question is why, and I don't have the answer to this. The government of India simply doesn't care. Why? I think only they can answer this question. I don't have an answer. Beats me. I'm clueless. I'm stumped by a mile. Abhijit Singh says, planning to watch Border 2. No plans to watch Border 2. I've watched Border 1 on the big screen when it came out. Yeah. It was a pretty long movie, but overall satisfying, good movie. I'm not sure if I should watch Border 2. I'll wait for the reviews to come in. Has it already come out, the movie? I'm not aware. Yeah. A lot of these movies are intensely disappointing when they come out. Like 21 has come out. I've not seen it, but I've heard not nice things. Dharmendra Deol's last movie. What did he do? So I'm not sure if I should watch Border 2. If the reviews are good, then yeah, I may perhaps consider watching it. Rarun Rajar says, when is the last time you're proven wrong? When was the last time I was proven wrong? I don't know exactly the last time. One example is this. I was a firm believer in the Aryan invasion theory. I believed it. I mean, it's what I had learned growing up, and all the textbooks said that there was an Aryan invasion of India, and it just made sense that it must have been like that. I never really paid attention to it, and I used to have these comments. I used to see these comments on Twitter that the Aryan invasion theory is wrong and all, and I used to get annoyed. With these people that why does everything have to be wrong? Why do you have to question everything? Then one day, I think in 2016 or whatever, I decided to actually examine the evidence properly. Not the textbooks and not the history books, but the actual historical data, the archaeological records, the history, the research papers, the genetic research papers. I went through all of that. And I was like, what the hell? I'm completely wrong with this. It was like the biggest revelation. It was a complete U-turn for me, 180 degrees turn. I was completely wrong in my belief that the Aryan invasion theory is correct. So that's one example. I'm sure there must have been more. Hani Sharma says, why are we so awful in tests and ODIs recently but dominate like no one else in T20s? Is it because of the new coach or something I can't see? Well, that's an interesting cricket question. Look, first of all, I've never played cricket seriously or professionally. So maybe I'm not the expert, but what do I see? Why are we so awful in tests and ODIs recently? Because we insist on having crap wickets, low bouncing, hard turning wickets, bad wickets, terrible wickets. The best wickets, according to me, quality wickets, those are the Australian wickets. They are hard and bouncing wickets. I've seen various Indian teams tour Australia over the years since the early 90s. And what I've always seen in the past, not recent 2-3 tours, but in the past, is that the first 3-4 matches, the Indian batsmen always struggle because it's hard and bouncing. They can't handle the bounce. But once they get the hang of the bounce, they play superbly. Especially quality batsmen like Lakshman and Dravid and Tendulkar, even Sehwag and so on. Did I miss some names? I'm sure I must have missed some names. But high quality batsmen, they love those hard bouncing wickets. They play superbly there. Even Kohli is another example. So you need quality wickets. Okay, what's the definition of a quality wicket? A high quality wicket. A high quality wicket is a wicket on which high quality batsmen will get runs and high quality bowlers will get wickets. But poor batsmen will struggle and poor bowlers will struggle. That's a high quality wicket. It's balanced. Now look at India's wickets, the kind of Indian wickets India produces in test matches. Rubbish wickets. Wickets that crumble in like within a day. And then this start spinning viciously. When you have a dibbly-dobbly bowler like Joe Root who can take wickets, or who's the latest South African guy who came and took so many wickets, a part-time off-spinner takes wickets like he's Muttiah Muralidharan. When you have part-time bowlers becoming life-threatening, that's an example of a very bad wicket. And in seam bowling terms, when you have Phil Simmons bowling 10 overs for 3 runs and taking 4 wickets, that's a very poor fast bowling wicket. So you need to have a balanced wicket. That is challenging but fair. And that's what we would like to see in test matches. And if you produce these third-rate wickets, then the others will take advantage of that. And T20s, it's okay. It's good to see T20s, but the real test of high-quality cricket is test matches. And we have been doing poorly of late. Is it because of the new coach? Something I can't see. I mean, we look at our bowling attack. We have one world-class bowler, Bumrah, right? We don't have any other world-class bowler right now. Shami is world-class, but he has been kept out for whatever reason. Why is he being kept out? Why? He was the best bowler of the 2023 World Cup. He should have been the man of the series, not Kohli. He bulldozed every opposition on Indian wickets. So why is he not in the team? I don't get it. So that clearly seems to be something beyond merit. Why? So we have world-class spin bowlers. We have Ravi Jadeja. Who else do we have? Whoever it may be. Kuldeep. We have Bumrah, world-class fast bowler, one of the greatest of all time, of course. Shami is also a great bowler, but he's not there. So who do we have? We have Prasidh, we have Siraj, we have Harshit. Those good bowlers, but not great. So there's many problems. And maybe something to do with the coach, but perhaps. I mean, I'm a big fan of Gambhir, especially as a player. He was a great player for a while. Not the best of all time, but definitely a very hard worker and all. But yeah, something's wrong. It needs to be fixed. There's something wrong with the mindset. You should have high quality wickets. Anyhow, that's a good diversion into cricket. Okay, let's get back on track. Okay, Sergeant Skyland says, sorry to clarify my earlier question regarding Trump's term. Good for India? Like, will India use this opportunity to make reforms? Oh, well, an external challenge is often a great opportunity for a nation to make reforms, to solve internal problems. So will India use it? Will India use this opportunity that we have external pressure? Will we use this opportunity to make internal reforms? Well, I don't know. That depends on the government and the leadership. That I can't tell. I can tell you what approach Trump will have towards India. It's going to be a hard approach. So that I can tell you. What India's response will be towards that. The reforms we need are major reforms. And, well, those can be unpopular in the short term. Politically unpopular in the short term. Will the government of India have the wherewithal to make such reforms? See, major reforms, deep-rooted reforms, pay dividends only in the long run. You won't see immediate returns for that. But that's what we need. And short term, you will have pain. If you do reforms that will only bring the results in the long run, it means there's going to be short-term pain. You go to gym for the first time, you're going to be in pain for 3 weeks. Every muscle fiber will hurt. But long term, it's going to be great for you. But do you have that in you to withstand those 3 weeks of pain? Or maybe 2 weeks, whatever, depends. So I'm not sure if India will use the opportunity to make the reforms. I'm not sure. Vihang Kurane says, is nuclear energy a good alternative for rocket and missile propulsion compared to chemical rockets, considering its success in submarines? Totally different matter. A submarine is a totally different thing. Okay? In submarine, you have a miniaturized nuclear reactor that drives the steam engine, essentially. That gives the energy, the electrical energy to the submarine, and the propulsive energy to its propeller. Okay? That's a massive thing, that nuclear reactor, even if it's a miniaturized nuclear reactor. It weighs a lot. Now, a nuclear reactor is a very expensive thing. Costs a lot of money. And if you use a nuclear reactor in a rocket or in a missile, you want to launch, let's say, 300 missiles every day. Can you have 300 nuclear reactors? First of all, how much money that will spend? How much money will you lose in that? And you can't have a nuclear reactor so small it will fit into the backside, posterior side of a missile. So yeah, it's not a great alternative. But we're still discussing rocket propulsion. Well, there's two kinds of nuclear rocket propulsion. One is simply nuclear detonations. You need a very massive rocket for that. Okay? And you can launch a rocket using nuclear detonations, pulsed nuclear detonations. There was this project in the 1960s or something, to Mars by A-bomb or something. I don't remember what it was called. Give me a second. Sorry, what is this? Give me a second. Let's Google this. So you can do that. Okay. To Mars by a bomb. Project Orion. Project Orion. So, what was this Project Orion? Nuclear propulsion. Okay, it was a study conducted in a series of atomic explosions behind the craft. So you're actually detonating nuclear bombs behind the craft. You need a very massive craft for that. So yeah, it's theoretically possible. Theoretically works. Another way of having nuclear propulsion in a rocket or a missile is to have a nuclear ramjet. Okay, that essentially can give a rocket or a missile unlimited range. You can keep it flying for months. Nuclear ramjet. Would you like to see that? Okay, I'll show you a nuclear ramjet. And the Russians have such a missile. Nuclear ramjet engine, Project Pluto. Nuclear ramjet and Russian nuclear ramjet. So the Russians have the Burevestnik. That's right. So they have this. So near unlimited range and low altitude stealthy flight and so on. Yeah. But once again, this is going to be pretty expensive. Each missile is going to be pretty expensive because you actually have a nuclear reactor inside it. So it's possible, but it's pretty expensive, and it's not something you want to do on a large scale. Rachit Srivastav says, Indians take pride in Jugaad, we need to fix it. See, every problem doesn't have a Jugaad solution, but Jugaad is a good tool to have in your toolkit. Jugaad means improvisation, right? You improvise, you somehow find a solution. It may be a stopgap solution, it may not be the most elegant solution, it may be a temporary solution or whatever, but you somehow make it work. That is a good tool to have in the toolkit, but it should not be the only tool we have in the toolkit. Unfortunately, the way things are in India, sometimes it's the only tool that people have. So it's good to have it, but we need to think of long-term solutions also. So yeah, I agree with you that we need to fix this mentality of only doing Jugaad for everything. I agree. Rahul says, with the UAE getting closer to Bharat, do you foresee more Arab nations doing so? With Oman's good relations with Bharat, can it be next to get close? We have good relations with various nations in the Arabian region. UAE, obviously, with the UAE, we have excellent relations. We have a free trade agreement, and we possibly will have a defense deal with them, mutual, I don't know, some kind of defense agreement, defense deal, nuclear cooperation, much more. And we have a massive population in the UAE. So UAE and India, very good relations. Do I foresee other nations? When it comes to Oman, we already have good relations with Oman. We already have some kind of defense understanding with Oman. Have you heard of Dukum? Well, this is not classified, so I suppose I can show this. It's obviously known to the public. Dukum, where is Dukum? Here we have Dukum. So this is a port city, port town, and we have a port here, port of Dukum. And India kind of operates some part of this port. India doesn't operate this port, but India has the permission to use the port for naval operations or naval refueling or whatever, right? So India has excellent relations with Oman, and so we already have a defense understanding clearly with Oman. So it's already close. It's not like it should be the next to get close. It's already close, and yeah, I think we are on a very good track when it comes to these matters. Obviously, Saudi Arabia is allying with Pakistan and with Turkey. So we have India and the UAE and Israel. That's the other coalition kind of thing that's emerging in this region. And we have good relations with Oman as well. So I think we are in good shape. I don't necessarily see India and Oman having to get closer than what they already are. Riser 199 says, how does Balkanize of India happen process your theory? No, we don't want this to happen. What is Balkanization, first of all? What's the process of Balkanization? Balkanization means the breakup of a nation into multiple pieces. This term comes from the Balkans region, The Yugoslavia region. Yugoslavia used to be one big country. Now it's broken up into multiple smaller countries: Serbia, Kosovo, Croatia, Bosnia, North Macedonia, and so on and so forth. Right? Uh, Balkanization. So how does this happen? It can happen in a variety of ways. Uh, the Americans simply broke up Yugoslavia through military force, essentially. And the Chinese and even the Americans would like India to be balkanized. So how did it happen in 1947? That's also a balkanization process, right? Historically, Gandhar was split off from India by invaders, by occupiers. So that was the first balkanization of India. 1935, the British broke off Burma from India, second balkanization. Then Sri Lanka, whenever it happened. And then 47 was Pakistan, East and West Pakistan. So these are processes of balkanization. You can have balkanization through multiple ways. This is one example. G. Gosavi says, why has no country tried color revolution in the US despite them abusing minorities too? US is probably most susceptible as the mistreat natives, blacks, etc. The US is too powerful. That's why. This answer is so simple. The US is just too powerful. It's not like, it's not like, okay, let's do balkanization or let's do color revolution and it'll happen. The process of a color revolution is a very long step-by-step process in which you to create the right conditions on the ground. You have to cultivate people. You have to cultivate traitors in the country. You have to cultivate media organizations. You have to cultivate NGOs. You have to infiltrate the country deeply and then create fake movements and all. It's a very long process. Why has the US never tried this in India? They kind of did a test run in 2019, the Shaheen Bagh thing and Delhi riots and all that. They did a test run, of course, because India is deeply penetrated and compromised in a variety of ways. So it's not easy. It's very difficult, right? That's why. Aries Manticore says LLMs are just the start. They're going semantic next. Let me tell you something. Interesting perspective. One of the world's biggest AI companies is Tesla. Tesla doesn't have LLMs. What does the Tesla AI do? What kind of training data is used to train the Tesla AI? Recordings of Tesla cars, video recordings. So the Tesla cars, they have this video. They record video, right? Self-driving video and all that, or manual driving video. So all of that, every day, probably hundreds of thousands of hours of video are recorded. All of that is used to train the Tesla AI, the Tesla AI, to create a properly, genuinely autonomous self-driving system. So there are various ways of creating AIs. LLMs, it's just one kind of AI. There are all kinds of AIs. Died in plane crash says, a family member went to Sri Lanka, told that roads there are much better than in India. Is being an independent nation good for its people as they don't have to suffer under our Babudam? It's an advantage they have, that they don't have to suffer under the kind of conditions we have. Why are roads bad in India? I think the roads that come under the central government typically are better than the roads that come under certain state governments. The real reason why roads are bad in India, in some parts of India, is the alleged corruption. Entirely alleged corruption that allegedly exists. Let's say you hypothetically, allegedly allocate 100 crore for a road project. How much of that money is actually used allegedly to build the road? And where do the cuts allegedly go? That's the reason. Allegedly. Aries Manticore says, why didn't we create our own modern political philosophy to be taught in universities rather than communism, socialism, feminism, etc.? We are growing a poison that fundamentally does not ally with us. To create a modern political philosophy rooted in our civilizational values, you need high quality original thinkers. Which institution is supposed to produce high quality original thinkers? It's your education system. What is the quality of your education system? It's third rate garbage. It is trash. It seeks out, identifies, and destroys talent. And it promotes mediocrity. If somebody is a highly original thinker, it will seek out and destroy that person. That's your answer. That's why I keep saying that we must reform our education system top to bottom. This is your answer. Right? You can't have original, high quality, world class, top class thinkers with a third rate education system. You may have such people who are naturally brilliant and talented, but the education system will sideline them. It will never allow them to have a voice. It will drown them in the rat race. That's your answer, Aries Manticore, sir, ma'am, whatever. Okay. ICMB says, what's the future of channel? Can we contribute? You are contributing just by being my viewers and by interacting with me. The future is whatever we're seeing now is the future. There is no massive future plan as in I'll do something completely drastically different or something. This channel is about me interacting with you all and us exploring and understanding the world together, the past, present, and future, from three lenses: history, geopolitics, science. And that's what we continue doing. Maybe in the future I may do something somewhat different. Maybe people have been suggesting I restart the Understanding America series, or maybe I create standalone videos like I used to do before. Maybe I'll take that up. But overall, it's gonna be the way it is right now, mostly. Aries Manticore says the IAF released statements that we can't miss the next fighter jet generational leap. We need to either join the French-German FCAS or Japan-led Tempest programs, from which we at least start our own program. So what happens to the AMCA, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft? Isn't that a fifth generation fighter plane? Why do we need to partner with the French and Germans or the Japanese? Or why can't we do it on our own? I think this is highly perplexing. Why does all technology have to come from abroad? Why do all systems have to come from abroad? Why do we have to partner with foreigners for some people to be happy? This way we will always be dependent on foreign technology and subordinate to foreigners. So I don't get this. If this statement has actually been released by the IAF, it's perplexing in that case. Perplexing. McLevin says, why has the US and Russia never been in a direct war? Because a direct war between the US and Russia will inevitably lead to a nuclear exchange, because things escalate. And up the escalation ladder, we have things we don't want to use. So historically, it's been the USSR. Now it's Russia. But Russia has the same nuclear arsenal, and maybe a better nuclear arsenal, more augmented nuclear arsenal. So that's why it doesn't make any sense for them to ever be in a direct war. That's why it's always been proxy conflicts. Ashutosh Divekar says, in the 1820s, Thomas Munro's survey of indigenous education in India reported caste-wise composition of students and teachers, suggesting wide representation. Thoughts? No surprise. No surprise. All these stories, see, first of all, these four castes were instituted in India at the end of the 19th century, or maybe the beginning of the 20th century. That's when the British mandated that every Indian must identify with one of the four castes. Before that, you had Varna and Jati. Varna is the fourfold division, which people roughly had some idea of, but what they really identified with was the Jati. The Jati, right? You had thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Jatis in India. And it was the Jati that was more important than the Varna or the caste. The caste is a foreign term for India. Now, like you say, Thomas Munro's survey of indigenous education, we had our own indigenous education system in India, based in temples. The great universities have been destroyed 1,000 years ago, around 1000 AD. But we still had temples at the grassroots that survived and continued the Indian education system. And that's where the survey was done, in various temples, right? And various pathshalas and whatnot, right? And what they found, what Thomas Munro found, was You had wide representation, not just various so-called castes, varnas and jatis, but also both genders. Boys and girls were also equally represented. So all this atrocity literature of India being a casteist, oppressive, unequal society, it's all lies. And beyond that, I would recommend um read this thing. Okay, the Dharampal, Dharampal, Dharampal. What beautiful tree! The beautiful tree. Okay, indigenous Indian education in the 18th century. Read this. It's not one book. It's a series of, I think, 2-3 books. Okay, and that will. I mean, if you read that, you will understand that we had the world's best education system. The British ruined a beautiful thing. Everybody was given education. All the so-called castes, boys as well as girls, everybody was educated. And education was typically free. You had no monthly fees and tutorial and tuition fees and whatnot. Nothing. The British ruined a beautiful thing. And today, your teachers will tell you that the British brought education to India. Aries Manticore says, actually, we have recently privatized the space sector. Is the government of India trying to create more players alongside ISRO to eventually reach the frequency of launches you mentioned? They suspect sabotage too. I don't know if the government of India suspects sabotage. Obviously, they should. They should investigate that. Now, we have recently privatized the space sector, is in the sense that we have now allowed private companies to participate in the space sector. Some of the companies can simply produce spare parts or spares or components for ISRO rockets. And some space companies can start, developing their own rocket technologies or whatever. We have various companies that are trying to do that. Skyroot is a good example, right? It's good, but the private space sector is currently in its infancy. Okay, it's just starting off. You can't if you have a private space sector that's in its infancy, you can't use that as a justification to bring the number of launches of ISRO down to from maybe 20, 30, maybe 10, 20 to just 5. Let the private sector mature. Give it 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, typically minimum 10 years. And once they can start launching rockets and satellites on their own, then you can have ISRO do the other things. Right? Right now, the private space sector is in its infancy. It's taking baby steps. This is not the time to bring the frequency of launches of ISRO down. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's the issue. That's the issue. You see? Hani Sharma says, I think something is wrong with me. I'm preparing for CAT 26. I really want to study for hours, but after an hour, my brain is fried. Continue. If I take a break, that turns into hours. And the next thing I know, I'm watching Netflix the rest of the day. To be continued. And not to forget, I usually feel sleepy when I try to study. My vitamin B and D are in check, more or less. What do I do? What do you do? Well, that's a major problem you're having. So clearly, it's not an issue with your vitamin levels. They seem to be fine. I suppose you've done your blood work or whatever. You've just checked your vitamin and other levels. It seems to be fine. When you try to study, you feel sleepy. But when you watch Netflix, you can watch it all day. So what does it mean? What do you do? It means that you are not interested in what you're having to study. It doesn't interest you. Right? It doesn't motivate you. So what can you do about that? I would actually need to know more about you before I can give you a solution. Because I don't know what you're studying. I don't know how relevant it is to your life. Sometimes you get into various study programs because your parents pushed you into it. Maybe you want to do something else. And you have been pushed into it unwillingly. You have no choice but to accept what your parents forced you into. So you get into the course but your heart is somewhere else. Maybe you want to do something else. Maybe they're pushing you to be a lawyer, but you wanted to be a doctor. Maybe they're pushing you to be a doctor, but you wanted to be an entrepreneur. I don't know. Right? Or maybe you just don't know what's at the end of the tunnel. If I get this degree, then what happens? What do I do with my life? And you have no idea. And that's why you're not getting the motivation. So what you have to do is first find some kind of goal for yourself. Whatever age you're at, go forward 10 years and imagine what kind of life you want to live. What kind of work do you want to be doing in 10 years' time? Ideally, best case scenario, how much money do you want to have? And then work backwards. How do I reach there? And does this study program that I'm doing help me in that? If it does not, then maybe it's not the right thing for you. And if it does help you, then maybe this big goal motivates you towards that. So that's typically how we do it. Very often in India, what you find is many students who are pushed into things that they have no interest in, because parents know that, you've got to be safe in life, you've got to have a job, and so on. And maybe, yeah. So you've got to work things out for yourself. That's what you have to do. You have to figure out what is your big goal in life. You have to reverse engineer the success and figure out how do I reach there step by step. And then once you have the rough idea of how others have done it in the past, that sort of achievement, then you can figure out whether you are on the right track or not. Do I need to study this nonsense, or is it actually useful for me? If it's useful, then it's not nonsense. Then go for it. Study. Then you're motivated. Otherwise, drop it and do whatever is right for you along the path. But always have a plan B and plan C. Okay, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So that's the deal. Okay, sir. Anish Sharma, thank you. And all the best. I wish you well. I wish you success. All the best. Karthik Iyer says, why don't have hundreds of Chavdas, Sai Deepak, Sudhanshu Trivedis across the country busting propagandas and myths? The more the merrier. Why don't we have more of people such as these? I never thought about it. Why don't we have them? See, I'll tell you what. I wasn't produced by the education system of India. Okay? I am not a product of the education system. I did go through the Indian education system at some various times in my life, but it hasn't made me who I am. I am entirely self-made. So I suppose other people like this will be self-made, potentially, possibly. I don't know. Okay, I don't know what has been the life trajectory of the people you're mentioning here. For me, it's been like that. I am not a product of the education system. I am entirely self-made. Everything I've learned on my own. No one's taught me a thing. So that is, I suppose, a little rare in life. And maybe that's why we have fewer people like these, I suppose. That could be one answer to your question, perhaps. Possibly, I'm just speculating here. Aries Manticore says, many secular people trying to tell us to think critically about the positive contributions of the Mughals that are not taught to us. Critically, I say strangled economy, terrorized population, what else? I mean, I can't think of any significant positive contributions of the Mughals. They were foreign occupiers. And if you say they were born in India and they had Indian mothers or whatever, Aurangzeb was born in India, he would have had Indian female ancestors. What was he? He was a monster. He was a barbarian. He was a terrorist. So I don't know what real positive contributions they did. So my suggestion, my recommendation is ignore these secular people. Critical thinking. They're going to teach you critical thinking, really? They're teaching you the opposite. They are recommending you do the opposite of critical thinking and ignore the evidence that's staring us in the face, right? Ignore such people. Aries Manticore says, we need to not only reform policy, but institutional capture with the right people. We should have learned this from the Soviets, would have made our bureaucracy a fast and mean machine, unlike the Babu Dam. I agree with you. But reforms are difficult, they're hard, and they're painful. You're going to face pushback from the people who are invested in the system, from the people who benefit from the system. They won't let you do the reforms. They will resist the reforms. Let's say you want to reform the bureaucracy. Let's say you bring in one new rule, only one new rule, that a bureaucrat can be actually fired for non-performance or for doing something harmful. Right now, you can only suspend a bureaucrat. And then the bureaucrat is generally, after the suspension period of 1 week, 1 month, or whatever, brought back into work. You can't terminate a bureaucrat's employment, right? You can only suspend them. Suspension is a joke. Let's say you bring in a new law that says that now, instead of suspending, we can fire people. We can terminate employment permanently. What will happen? I imagine the entire bureaucracy will go on strike and the whole country will be paralyzed. Then what does the government do? It can't do a thing. These are issues, right? Major issues. The people who benefit from this rotten system, they won't give in easily. They'll try their best to stop reforms from happening. Then what happens? Prime Minister has to roll back reforms and issue an apology. How does it look? Best not try these things. You see, that's the problem. Rarun. Okay. The question is, can you tell about the hindrance Covaxin faced, even though it's better than many by WHO and West? Big pharma afraid, UK quarantined, Covaxin, Mexico politics, etc. We may have given for cheap or free. Okay, I am not very, very deeply. I don't know much about this. I'm obviously aware of Covaxin. That it's the vaccine India developed indigenously, and it's not an RNA-based vaccine, messenger RNA vaccine. It's a standard, good old-fashioned vaccine. The good old-fashioned vaccines are typically vaccines that use either disabled or partial viral sequences. What's a virus? There are various ways of looking at a virus. A virus is something, it's an organism that it exists on the boundary between living and non-living. It has some properties of living beings and some properties of non-living beings. It's on the boundary. But one of the properties viruses have that are that of living beings is that it has DNA or RNA. That is something non-living beings don't have, right? So that's a virus. But viruses typically have short genetic sequences, DNA or RNA. They're like genetic ideas, bits of ideas floating around. So typically in an old-fashioned vaccine, what you do is you take a disabled virus that can't really hurt you, or you take a partial fragmented virus or whatever, and you use that to make the body familiar with the virus and develop the antibodies needed to fight off the viral infection. That's your standard old-fashioned vaccine, and that's what Covaxin is. The messenger DNA vaccine that Pfizer and others have produced, my goodness, I don't know what even that is frightening. You don't want that in your system. And that's it looks like, in the past when I used to talk about coronavirus or COVID on this channel, you would get a disclaimer below the video and all, even on Spotify. Now it's not the case. I'm glad. It looks like the Pfizer vaccine has killed more people than it has saved, right? And the Americans wanted India to allow the Pfizer vaccine in India, and India insisted on user trials, and they said we will not do user trials. I mean, what? Why will you not do user trials? Get lost. So that's why the Pfizer vaccine was not allowed in India, thankfully. And that's why we are in better shape. That's what I know. I don't know about the hindrance and all that. That story I'm not aware of. So, Vihang says, if we develop large language models using Indian languages and data, can it then be used to decipher an unknown language belonging to some Indian language family? Can AI be used to decipher unknown languages? Absolutely. Absolutely. It can. Yeah, that's the answer. If we develop large language models using Indian languages, see, all Indian languages are interconnected. North Indian, South Indian, East Indian, West Indian, all Indian languages have connections, deep connections, going back thousands of years, going back to ancestral languages, some of which are no longer spoken, many of which are no longer spoken, right? So if we train LLMs on these languages, with all the texts we have, they'll be able to decipher any unknown language that is part of these language families. Even languages that are less related or far away with distant relations. Like, let's say the LLM has never come across, for example, the Irish language. You give it the Irish language, it may be able to quickly decipher that, even if it's only been trained on the Indian, Indo-Aryan and the so-called Dravidian languages. It'll be able to decipher that. So yeah, AI can certainly be used to decipher unknown languages. Ajuro Bitterthorn says, Dr. Sarah Payne from the US Naval College says the root of Russia and China's problems are that they are continental powers, so they always underperform naval powers like the UK, Japan, and US. Thoughts? India? Look, Dr. Sarah Payne is employed by the US Naval College, and she has to say things that make the US look good. Oh, you will see this. I've seen a few of her snippets of whatever she says. She consistently shows the US as the greatest power, the most benevolent power, and so on. And Russia and China, these are kind of incompetent nations, and so on, right? So whatever she says, you have to take it with the understanding that she's employed by the US Naval College, and it is her job to put forth a certain narrative, and she's deeply invested in that. So I watched a few videos, and I just got the idea of what she's trying to achieve. It's all right. Dr. Sarapin, I'm sure she's a high quality scholar, very knowledgeable, and so on, and also very intelligent. And that's a great combination, isn't it? Hyphen says thank you. Thank you so much, Hyphen G. Thank you so much. Vihang says, thank you for answering all my questions. You're most welcome. I've been watching the channel since you posted the video on best books in Indian history. Well, that's a long time ago. That's probably the first video I put out, right? Thank you for reigniting the love towards learning within me. Oh, thank you so much for being one of the first viewers of this channel, I suppose. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I look, without you viewers, without you all, this channel would not be relevant. So I would like to thank you, Vihang, and thank all of the viewers for your viewership, for your support, for just being here, right? Thank you so much, everyone, and to you also, especially you, Vihang. Thank you. IPK1S says, Babudam and reservations, why AMCA, etc. never happened. Yeah, well, why was the Tejas fighter delayed? The project came out in the early 80s, right? The Tejas fighter jet as a replacement for the MiG-21. The MiG-21 was finally retired, I think, last year. The project came out in the early 80s. It was delayed over and over again. Why was it delayed so many times? Because the requirements were changed randomly. I'm just giving a hypothetical representational example here, not necessarily what happened. Let's say the requirement is that the jet fighter has to be 11 meters long. Then that's how the design proceeds. A year later, they say, no, it should be 11.3 meters long. It's a completely hypothetical example, okay? It's not really what happened. I'm just saying that's how you can randomly change requirements arbitrarily. Then you say, I want the wings to be certain dimensions. 6 months later, you say, no, I want them to be so and so, some other dimensions. You keep changing the requirements, the project can never take off. Then funding. If the funding isn't enough, sufficient, whatever, then how do you manufacture the prototypes and so on? So these are the issues. That's how you just keep on indefinitely delaying various programs, right? And who could be behind it? Could it be politicians? Could it be bureaucrats? Could it be somebody else? Who knows? And reservations is a whole different matter. I completely, I think reservations is a really bad thing. It's good in the short term, but like I keep saying, a permanent solution to a temporary problem becomes a permanent problem. And that's what India is increasingly seeing now. We are increasingly creating permanent solutions to temporary problems. Solutions that can't be rolled back. So they become permanent problems. That's what India is seeing over and over. Godliness says, yes, we face a lot of problems. Yes, we have difficulties. But we are the custodians of the Pashupati seal. And on this Republic Day, like always, we seek the blessings of Ma Bharati in Happy Republic Day. Happy Republic Day. Let us be positive. Let us be optimistic. We have problems. We have issues. But we shall overcome. And we shall prevail. Because we are the custodians of a very, very, very ancient civilization. The oldest civilization that is still in existence. And it's at least 10,000 years old. May it last at least another 10,000 years more. So let us do our part. We are one link in this immense chain. And it's our job to ensure that the future generations have better opportunities than us. So let's do it. All right. Great message. Thank you, Godliness. Thank you. Deep says, is the gold owned by large religious institutions in India helping the country or the economy grow? I was wondering what the purpose of that wealth is if it's just stored there for centuries. See, this wealth was donated to the temples over centuries, maybe thousands of years, by devotees. The temples served a certain purpose in society, of a central purpose in society. They were not merely places of worship, places of religion and spirituality. They were educational institutions. Okay, and they were so valuable to society and played such a vital role that people came and voluntarily donated their gold. Not just ordinary people, but even kings came and donated gold. Kings from neighboring kingdoms. Even in the Sri Padmanabha Swami temple, you will find coins donated by Greek kings and whatnot, thousands of years ago. So that was the purpose for which the wealth was donated to the temples. Now, what is the use of that wealth in the temples today? See, today we have a non-Indian constitution, essentially a adharmic constitution, and a non-Indian, non-dharmic system of governance. If this wealth is made available to the politicians, what will they use it for, I wonder? I think we can all imagine. So this wealth, I would say, should remain in the safe custody of the temples until India becomes a civilizational nation again, in line with its own civilizational values. Then let's see how the wealth can be used for society in the right way, not squandered away and dumped into the pockets and bank accounts of certain individuals. We don't want that to happen. Today, if you make this wealth available to the government, see, the government steals the wealth of so many temples. What is the wealth used for today? There are so many temples where the wealth is stolen by the government legally. It is legal, so it's not theft, but actually it's theft. Devotees donate money to the temple. The government takes the wealth and uses it for doing what? I'll not tell you what. We all know what the wealth is used for. It is not used for dharmic purposes. Right? So we have some temples where wealth is stored. We don't want that to be stolen for and used for essentially anti-civilization purposes. Right? So let it be there for the future generations. And hopefully it will be good for them, useful for them. If not, definitely not for us. Mange Kosherit says, do you think India today lacks good parenting? Look, does India lack good parenting? That's a pretty interesting question. I haven't really thought about it. Does India lack good parenting? Parents today typically, at least in cities, have less time for their kids. Kids are neglected. Kids become iPad kids. Gen Z, Gen Alpha are increasingly out of touch with their culture and so on, because parents have to work so hard, and both parents have to work and so on. Is that bad parenting? I suppose it is not as good as the previous generations, right? So I suppose the quality of parenting and the quality of childhoods have kind of decreased as the generations have gone by. So in the past, let's say in the 1950s and 1960s, you would have had in India mostly extended families, right? Joint families, it used to be called. It's extended families, people living with their siblings in one house, all getting married and so on. And you have these extended families being raised together. So kids have access to their grandparents and aunts and uncles and nephews and cousins and whatnot. An extended big family, and it's a big social environment. And you grow up in a big environment like this, you learn better. Today you have nuclear families in big cities where kids aren't socialized the same way, and obviously it's a different quality of childhood, maybe a poorer quality of childhood. So overall things have changed. I would not know for sure whether it's bad or poor parenting or less good parenting, but definitely the childhood experience has changed. It's not changed for the better. Okay, YT user says, what's your opinion on Europa the Last Battle? Do you think it's propaganda, as they say history is written by winners? Europa the Last Battle, I haven't seen it. It's this massive documentary, right, about the Second World War. What is that? Europa the Last Battle. What is this? It's about the Second World War. 2017 English language Swedish 10-part neo-Nazi propaganda film. So I suppose it glorifies the Nazis and Hitler and so on. I haven't seen it, so I can't say. I haven't seen it. I believe it's a pretty massive documentary. 10 part, was it? 10 part, and each part must be at least an hour long. So it must be like 10, 12 hours. So I haven't seen that. Can't say. Sirijai Singh says, adversary camp have been tearing the fabric of India apart. Caste, language, gender, religion, region, government changes, playbook stays since 47. When do we counter it and how? What can the ordinary people of India do? Nothing. All you can do is vote and hope for the best. It is the people who we vote for who are supposed to make things better. So what can India do about this? So what India ideally needs is, India needs a new constitution, a new form of governance, ideally a presidential form or something similar, right? A new constitution, a new form of governance, a new education system, everything new. Who's going to do it for us? It can only be the people who we vote to power. But the people who we vote to power come to power through the current system. And why will they change the current system which brought them to power? So that's the loop we are stuck in. I have no idea how it's going to be changed. We're going to need a leader who comes around once in a century or once in 500 years. Someone like Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, or somebody like Kanishka or Samudragupta, somebody of that sort, somebody like Vishnugupta Chanakya. We don't have anybody of that stature today. Somebody of the stature of Lord Krishna or Lord Ram, somebody like that we'll need, who can, through sheer will, force of will, change everything. As of now, I don't see any such leader. Yeah, that ordinary people can't do a thing. You can't do a thing without power. So either you get into politics and acquire power and change things, or you vote and hope for the best, that whoever you are voting for does the right thing for India. And that we know how it goes. Aries Manticore says, global education levels are falling with the latest generation, especially since ChatGPT may have lost the ability to critically think, are easy to manipulate, no soft skills, etc. What WTF is going on? It's going on, yes. Especially with ChatGPT, especially in India. I mean, people have just delegated their thinking process to ChatGPT. Oh, ChatGPT told me, so it must be true, that sort of thing. It's dumbing people down. People don't want to think anymore. ChatGPT, what can I do about this? How do I solve this problem? Grok, is this true? That's it. People just don't want to do any work anymore. So it makes people easier to manipulate. It makes it easier to lie to people, to mislead people, to change governments, to change regimes, to create a one world government. You see where we're going? Vipul Pawar says, does entanglement fully determine geometry? Not that I know of. Geometry, no. How can entanglement determine geometry? Geometry is shapes. Entanglement is a quantum mechanical phenomenon. It does not in any way determine geometry that I know of. So, no. Hani Sharma says, CAT is for MBA and I want to do it, and I have the motivation to study in the morning but can't sit for hours. So you're doing a CAT, common CAT. What's a CAT? One second. What is a CAT? CAT MBA. CAT MBA. Sorry, MBA. Not MDA. Sorry, not what is that? What's a CAT? Common admission test. Okay, you want to get into the into an MBA program. For that, you have to do a common admission test, CAT. And you have the motivation to study for it in the morning, but can't sit for hours. How can I do it? After 1 or 2, I need a break, and that turns into a rabbit hole. I just want to do it, earn a shit ton of money. Okay, so you want to do it. It motivates you. You want to achieve what this gives you because it will bring you money. So then how do you motivate yourself and so on, right? So, okay, so let's say you study for 1 hour and then you are like, okay, I need a break. And then you go and watch Netflix. Okay, so I'll tell you what, don't go and watch Netflix. Go and do 50 push-ups. Do 5 push-ups. Then go for a 10-minute walk. Don't watch Netflix. Do some shadow boxing, yeah? Or do something that is physical in nature. Go for a short run. Then come back. That will reset your brain. Right? Then you come back and study just 30 minutes more. So maybe 1 hour is too long for you. Maybe you needed 20-minute sessions. So do a 20-minute session, then do 5 push-ups, or do a 20-minute session, then do a 10-minute jog or a 10-minute walk. then come back and do it again. So chunk it down to smaller chunks. That's you have to try these different techniques. Make it work somehow. If you can't study for hours, I can't study for hours. I hate it. Right? So do it that way. Study for, let's say, just 20 minutes. Study one topic for 20 minutes and go and do 5 push-ups or go and do a 10-minute walk. Come back, do another 20-minute session of studying, then do another 5 push-ups or 1 minute, 10-minute walk, then do it again, then do something else, lift some weights, do something different. Break the pattern of Netflix and whatever rabbit hole you're getting into. Don't do anything with a screen. Do something out there. That could be a good solution, okay? Try it out, sir. All the best. Make it work. Rohit Sridhar says, how badly do you think India has been impacted by its failure to industrialize? Modi is doing some things, but is it too late? Can India still build a strong manufacturing base? I think India can still build a strong manufacturing base. We will need massive reforms in the ease of doing business. Cut down the red tape, cut down the alleged corruption. Make energy cheaper. The price of energy in India is so much higher than China, Russia, US, etc. Electricity. Make it cheaper. Cut down all the red tape and all the license, whatever the hell exists, right? All the unnecessary bureaucracy, all that. Make it easy to run a business. Make it easy to start a business. Whatever problems exist, cut them down. Make it easy for people to acquire capital, acquire funding, start a business, try, fail, start, try again. All that. It's possible. India can industrialize. And obviously, India has been massively impacted by its failure to industrialize. We should have industrialized in the 1950s. We did not. But it's not too late. Modi is doing things. He's building massive infrastructure, roads, railways, airports, whatnot. But we need to industrialize. Yeah, I agree. It needs to happen. It can be done. It will need reforms. Aries Manticore says, bloated primary education systems of the world collapsing on themselves, producing extremely mediocre students. Almost all of these are West-derived, infiltrated by wokeism, DEI. Is it a coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. The quality of education worldwide is going down. The US education system is pretty poor now compared to what they had in the 1950s. In the 1950s, they had the world's best education system, high quality education system. And since then, it's been going down, down, down. And now, right now, it's pretty bad. But it's still leagues ahead of India. Then you have other education systems across the world that are kind of going down. Chinese education system is getting better and better. So you see this happening in the West. They are dumbing their people down. They want sheep. They don't want original thinkers. They want people who obey. Right? You're seeing Big Brother in action. George Orwell, 1984. You're seeing that in action. It's not a coincidence. The West wants just sheep to rule over. So this is now showing us what the West really is. It's an authoritarian system, masquerading for the longest time as a benevolent, democratic system and all that. We are seeing it now, seeing it for what it is. Okay, Ayush Gupta says, can't we launch military satellites with Russia? I suppose we can. It'll cost us. See, why do we prefer to launch our own satellites, whether it's military or whatever? Because it's cheap. We build our rockets and we launch the satellites. Full freedom, no constraints, no nothing. When somebody else launches satellites for us, they'll charge money. And they'll charge more than what it costs to launch the satellites ourselves. Right? So ideally, we should launch our satellites through our own rockets only. It gives us full freedom, full sovereignty, or whatever we're doing. So that's the reason why. Of course, we can use Russian rockets, American rockets. We sometimes use SpaceX rockets because they're very cheap. But we can also use Russian rockets in that case. EVMGJ says, thoughts on ARR. What's ARR? AR Rahman. AR Rahman's recent comments. People elevated him to godlike status, yet he chose to play victim and show his true colors. Well, what are my thoughts? Never liked him. This may be unpopular, what I'm going to say. I think he's mediocre as a musician. What he's good at is electronic music. In the 1990s, Indian music Bollywood music and film music was all Indian instruments. And A.R. Rahman brought in the synthesizers and all the Western instruments, electronic instruments, and he made the music sound great. But he's not original. He's a good sound engineer, music engineer. He's not a great musician. He's an overrated singer. He's mediocre, and I don't like his singing, and I don't like his music. Nothing to do with his background or whatever. I just don't. I understand music. Okay, I understand what music is. I have a musical background myself, so I understand what music is, and there's nothing special about A.R. Rahman. Mediocre, average guy. And his recent comments is a whole different story. I've never liked him. I said this in 2021 or something, and I had a big backlash. Well, here we are today. I stand by my words. He's mediocre and overrated. So I'll just comment about what I think of him as a musician. The rest, I think everyone can see what he is. AKS Baga says, WSJ, Wall Street Journal reports just 30 minutes ago that China's top general leaked nuclear secrets to the US. Well, that's fascinating. Let's see. Wall Street Journal, China General. What does it say? China's Xi places top general under investigation, alleged severe violations of party discipline, state laws. No. I want. China's top general accused of giving nuclear secrets to the US, bribery allegations, and oh my goodness, he is in deep trouble. This is a serious purge. Okay, thank you for bringing this to my notice. So Xi is going after this. He's totally going after this guy. This guy is doomed. So yeah, like I said, Chinese politics is cutthroat. I don't know if he actually did that, but yeah, well, he's done. His goose is cooked. -6552 says, I was very good at math. I had to quit my education after SSC because I started working early in my life. I'm 48 now. I want to restart learning maths. I don't know where to begin. Any suggestions? I'll tell you what. The best way to learn maths is self-study, is by using the Shom series books, okay? So you start with Shom. Oh man, come on. Shom Elementary Mathematics. This is the first book you start. It will teach you the basics. You just work through all the problems. How do you learn math? You learn math by solving problems. That's the only way you learn mathematics. There is no other way of learning mathematics. And the Shom books are the ideal way of learning mathematics. Self-study. So you start with elementary mathematics, then you go to elementary algebra. Okay, you go through all the problems here. Then you go into Shom's. Then you go into geometry. Then once you're done with geometry, I suppose you go into trigonometry. Shom's trigonometry. There we have it. You go for this one. Then you go with pre-calculus. Shom's pre-calculus. Then you go with calculus, and so on. And then when you are good with algebra, trigonometry, geometry, pre-calculus, calculus, well, I think then you can do it your own way, whichever way you want to go. That's how we do it. The Shom series set of books is the best series of books for mathematics. You don't need anything else. So this is, the kind of math you would want to use in physics. If you want to go into number theory and all, well, there are different books for that. But I'm assuming you are talking about the standard maths that, a physicist would eventually use. So that's what you do. Okay, sir, all the best. I'm glad that somebody wants to actually learn math at the age of 48. Why not? Why not? Outstanding. I love it. All the best, sir. Do well. Dark Orion says the Babus won't strike if reforms are done. Or if reforms are done. I continued. The Babus will strike. I am pretty sure they will. And they won't allow reforms to happen. If it impacts them and their interests. That's what I expect. Okay. Bhaskar Bandit says, what are the qualities of an excellent diplomat and statesman? Any examples of such which you might have admired? Look, diplomats are tools. Diplomats are minions of the people who really do the things. And of course, you The world has seen some really high quality diplomats, who made a big impact on the world. Obviously, Henry Kissinger is a great example, and who was the guy? Napoleon's foreign minister. Forget his name. Napoleon's foreign minister. Talleyrand. Charles Maurice de Talleyrand Périgord. This guy. He is another very famous diplomat, very accomplished diplomat, and was great at his job. So, what are the qualities of an excellent diplomat? See, diplomat and statesman are totally different things. A statesman is a world leader. That's a totally different thing from being a diplomat. Totally different set of skills. A diplomat is somebody who's a great communicator, great negotiator, somebody who's loyal and faithful to the boss, someone who's loyal and faithful to the country, and someone who can use who understands what power is, what leverage is, and understands how to use leverage in negotiations, who is sophisticated and suave and polite in public and brutal in private, and so on. There's plenty of qualities that go into this, right? Somebody who can take pressure, somebody who can take threats, who can convey pressure and threats, and so on. So, okay. Mange Kaushairet says, is a black hole an object or a pathway? As far as we know, it's it's an object. There are some theories that black holes could be pathways and so on, but look, the standard solutions to the Einstein field equations say that you have a black hole is a region in space-time that conceals essentially a singularity at the center. A singularity is a region of space-time that has infinite curvature and infinite density, which is obviously unphysical, but yeah, that's the solution. But those are the solutions to Einstein field equations, typically this Schwarzschild solution and so on. So these are objects, not pathways. Of course, you can have something like the Einstein-Rosen bridge, which is a pathway. That's the Einstein-Rosen bridge is colloquially known as a wormhole. That's a pathway, but that's a pathway that snaps shut. It wants to snap shut. It doesn't want to stay open. The neck closes and splits to two black holes. How do you keep it open? Well, that's a big question. You can either use exotic matter such as negative mass matter, or you could use not even antimatter. No, negative matter with negative mass with repulsive gravity could potentially keep that open if such matter even exists. Or you could use something like a cosmic string, which is a topological defect in the fabric of space-time itself, and so on. So a black hole is an object, it's not a pathway. Bhaskar Bandit says, 396 Russian drones hit Kiev yesterday. It's the second day of talks in the UAE. Will this round end the same as before? US pushing and Zelensky not backing off. Nothing's going to change. Nothing. Yeah, this round of talks is not going to produce any results. Yeah, I don't see that happening. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there is some ceasefire or something, but no. Zelensky, his life depends on the war continuing. Why will he back off? Yeah, so yeah, I don't see anything happening at this point in time. Bhaskar Bandit says Mughals or Muggles? Muggles. 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 And I think that was the last of the questions for today. It's been 3.5 hours, nearly 3.5 hours. Well, that brings me to the end of episode 325 of Ask Abhijit. Thank you so much, everybody, for all the questions. It was always great fun. I look forward to continuing this next week in the episodes that we will have next weekend. So I look forward to seeing you there. Keep learning, my friends. Keep learning, keep being positive, keep asking questions, and keep raising your standards. Take care. I'll see you very soon in the next one. Bye-bye for now.